Section 1. Hey guys, tonight we settle into the quiet, almost oppressive stillness of a place built for silence, long before dawn thinks about cracking the eastern sky. You stand outside a massive oak door, thick as your thigh, banded with iron that feels icy even through your rough woolen sleeve. This isn't some cozy library nook. It's the entrance to a world of disciplined shadows, the Monastery scriptorium. The air bites with a damp chill that seeps right into your bones, a far cry from your warm bed. Imagine trying to function on this schedule now, up for prayers in the dead of night, stumbling through cold stone corridors on bare feet or thin sandals, fueled by faith, stale bread, and maybe some questionable herbal brew masquerading as coffee. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a week without complaining about the Wi-Fi signal. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where this quiet journey finds company. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You grasp the cold, black iron ring. It's heavy, unyielding. Pulling feels like trying to drag a sleeping ball. The wood groans a protest, a deep, resonant croak that echoes far too loudly in the profound hush. It's a sound older than the stones around you, announcing your intrusion into a space dedicated to quiet contemplation and labor. That groan isn't just wood straining. It's centuries of monks before you, all dragging that same reluctant portal open for the same purpose. You slip through the narrow opening you've managed, the door's immense weight immediately wanting to slam shut behind you like a vault ceiling. The air inside isn't warmer, just stiller, thicker. It smells of dust, old stone, dried herbs hung somewhere nearby, the faint, sharp tang of vinegar used for cleaning, and underneath it all, a persistent, earthy dampness that clings to everything. Think of the chill in your basement, but ancient, purposeful, and utterly inescapable. The corridor stretches ahead, barely lit by a single, sputtering rushlight jammed into a wall sconce. Its flame dances nervously, casting long, leaping shadows that make the rough-hewn walls seem to breathe. Your footsteps, even in soft shoes, sound like clumsy drumbeats on the flagstone floor. It feels forbidden, this noise. You instinctively hold your breath, trying to melt into the silence, acutely aware of every rustle of your coarse habit, every tiny click in the joints of your cold fingers. Mainstream historical fact. This pre-dawn work session, often starting after the night office of matins, around 2 a.m., was a core part of the Benedictine monastic horarium, the rigid daily schedule governing prayer, work, and study. Their motto, ora et labora, pray and work, wasn't just a nice phrase, it was a demanding, round-the-clock reality. The darkness outside the narrow windows is absolute, pressing against the thick glass like black wool. There are no city lights, no distant hum of traffic, just a void. It's a darkness so complete it feels alive, reminding you how utterly removed this place is from the world you know. Your modern brain, wired for constant stimulation, rebels against the quiet. Where's the notification ping? The background music? The fridge light? It's just you, the cold, the smell, and the profound, almost deafening silence of a community dedicated to listening. Listening to God, to the texts, to the scratch of their own quills. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some cloisters, especially those in particularly damp regions like Ireland or northern France, reportedly mixed powdered earthworm casts into their mortar for insulation. Whether it was superstition, earth binds, or a genuine, if misguided, attempt at damp-proofing, imagine knowing the walls holding back the endless night chill might be partly held together by worm poop. Tonight, the walls just feel cold and slightly slimy. You pass a small alcove where a statue of a severe-looking saint stares blankly ahead, one hand raised in blessing, the other clutching a book. The flickering light makes his stone eyes seem to follow you. It's unnerving. You hurry past, rounding a corner. The scriptorium door is smaller, less imposing than the main entrance, but no less solid. You pause. Beyond this lies your work for the next few hours. A wave of tiredness hits you, sharp and sudden. Your eyes feel gritty. Your body aches for horizontal stillness. This isn't just physical fatigue. It's the deep weariness of being awake when every primal instinct screams for sleep. Historians still argue whether this nocturnal copying schedule was driven purely by the demands of the divine office freeing up daylight for manual labor, or if there was a deeper, symbolic reason. A belief that wrestling with sacred texts in the liminal, dangerous hours before dawn was a form of spiritual combat, mirroring Christ's own vigil in Gethsemane. Was copying scripture in the dead of night an act of devotion or endurance? Or both? You push the thought aside, along with the lingering image of the worm mortar, and grasp the handle. Time to face the quiet, the cold, and the backward letters waiting in the gloom. Your sanctuary of sleep feels galaxies away. Section 2. The door yields with a whisper this time, swinging inward on well-oiled hinges, a small mercy in this realm of deliberate discomfort. You step across the threshold, and the cold hits you like a physical wall. It's denser here, sharper, as if the stones themselves hoard winter's chill even in midsummer. Your breath mists instantly, catching the feeble light of a dozen candles scattered like fallen stars across the long room. This is the scriptorium, your workplace, your prison, your sanctuary for the next 5 hours. Rows of high wooden desks stand like sentinels, each bearing the same sparse tools: a quill, an inkpot, a knife, a pumice stone. No two are identical. They bear the scars and stains of generations. You find yours near the back, a battered oak surface gouged with initials, wax blobs, and the ghostly imprints of elbows worn smooth by centuries of weary scribes. The stool is a 3-legged torture device designed to keep you alert through sheer discomfort. You perch on its edge, your thin habit offering no cushion against the unyielding wood. Above you, the vaulted ceiling vanishes into shadow. No grand frescoes here, just rough plaster and timber ribs, blackened by decades of candle smoke. Mainstream historical fact: this austerity was intentional. Benedictine rule demanded simplicity to avoid distracting the mind from holy labor. Your candle, a stub of tallow that smells faintly of burnt mutton fat, sputters in a crude clay dish. Its light pools weakly on the desk, leaving the corners of the room to the dominion of shifting, formless shadows. You hunch forward instinctively, shoulders rounding, trying to trap what little warmth radiates from the flame. The chill seeps up from the flagstones through your thin soles, a constant reminder that comfort is a worldly illusion. Across the aisle, Brother Anselm, a gaunt man with ink-stained fingers, rubs his hands together, blowing into them before picking up his quill. He doesn't look up. Silence reigns, but it's a living silence. The scrape of knives trimming quills, the rustle of vellum, the soft thump of a pestle grinding pigment in a mortar. Quirky or fringe tidbit: some scriptoria allegedly used candle clocks, candles marked with measured lines, to ration light. If yours burned past the 3rd notch before matins, you'd face the abbot's displeasure. Yours already drools wax like a tired old hound. You shift, and the stool creaks, a sound as loud as a shout in this quiet. Eyes flick toward you, then away. Judgment hangs thick. The air tastes of dust and something metallic, iron gall ink, already mixed and waiting. Your knuckles brush against a dark smudge on the desk's edge. It feels waxy, permanent. Centuries of monks have left their sweat and skin oils here, embedding themselves into the grain. You're just the latest in an unbroken chain of exhaustion. Outside, the wind moans through a high, narrow window slit. No glass, just a shutter propped open a finger's width, letting in a thread of frigid air and the scent of wet earth. It's pitch black beyond. The world feels reduced to this circle of faltering light. You flex your fingers, stiff with cold. They ache dully, protesting the coming labor. Historians still argue whether scriptoria were truly this silent. Some accounts describe whispered readings or murmured prayers. Others insist any noise beyond necessary sounds invited penance. Maybe it depended on the abbot's temperament, a tyrant demanding absolute quiet or a pragmatist allowing soft collaboration. Tonight, the silence feels absolute, heavy as a cloak. Your stomach growls, a traitorous rumble echoing in the stillness. Supper was a thin vegetable pottage and coarse bread, hours ago. Breakfast won't come until after Lord's, when the sky pales. You think longingly of your warm bed, a straw mattress and rough blanket, now impossibly distant. The candle flame wavers, stretching shadows into grotesque shapes on the walls. For a dizzying moment, the dancing darkness looks like a hooded figure looming over Brother Anselm's shoulder. You blink, and it's just shadow again. Fatigue plays tricks. On the desk, a small wooden bowl holds a lump of stale bread. Not food, It's an eraser. Press it onto a wet ink blot, and it lifts the excess. Next to it lies your knife, sharpened to a wicked point. It's for trimming quills, but it looks like a surgeon's tool. Everything here serves dual purposes. The knife corrects errors. The pumice stone smooths vellum but could scrub flaws. Your exhaustion is both penance and pathway to piety. You pick up the quill, a goose feather, its hollow shaft cool against your palm. It's surprisingly light, fragile. One clumsy move, and it snaps. The irony isn't lost on you. You'll spend hours wielding this delicate thing to copy words meant to endure for eternity. The candle gutters, spitting a spark onto the desk. You smother it with your sleeve, leaving a tiny charred star on the wool. Brother Anselm sighs softly, a sound like dry leaves skittering on stone. Dawn is an unfathomable stretch away. The cold has settled deep into your bones now, a familiar companion. You lean closer to the candle, its feeble warmth barely kissing your face. The vellum lies blank, expectant. The night's work is about to begin. Section 3. Your fingers, still stiff and protesting the cold, hover over the tools laid out with monastic precision. This isn't a fancy stationery set. It's survival gear for the war against darkness and decay. First, the knife. It feels heavier than it looks, its bone handle worn smooth by countless hands before yours. The blade gleams dully in the candlelight, sharpened to a cruel edge. You pick it up, the cold metal biting into your skin. This isn't just for trimming quills. It's your line of defense against error, your sculptor of meaning. You test its weight, remembering the callous thumb of Brother Martin who taught you the grip, thumb braced against the spine, fingers wrapped tight, control born from necessity. A slip could ruin precious vellum or, worse, slice deep into your own flesh. Mainstream historical fact, the scribe's knife, penna cultellus, was arguably the most vital tool. Beyond shaping quills, it scraped away errors on parchment, a process called rasura, cut sheets to size, and even scored guidelines for straight writing. Its edge needed constant maintenance. A dull knife meant ragged quills and torn skin. You draw the blade lightly across a scrap of leather strop hanging from the desk, the rhythmic shoes echoing softly. It's a sound as old as writing itself. Next, the quill. Not just any feather, but a primary flight feather, likely plucked from a goose during molting season. It lies there, deceptively simple. You pick it up. The hollow shaft feels cool, almost brittle. The tip is blunt, useless for writing. This is where the knife earns its keep. You brace the quill against the worn wood, feeling the slight give of the keratin. Carefully, deliberately, you angle the knife. One shallow cut along the side, removing a sliver to create the slit that will channel the ink. Too deep, and the quill splits. Too shallow, and the ink won't flow. It requires a surgeon's precision and a gambler's nerve. The knife bites, releasing a faint, dry smell, like old paper and dust. You shave the tip into a point, rotating the quill slowly. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some marginalia and monastic notes suggest certain scriptoria believe specific goose breeds produce superior quills, quieter writers, smoother flow. Legends even whispered of feathers plucked under full moon yielding ink that resisted fading. Yours feels stubbornly ordinary. You blow away the tiny shavings, watching them vanish into the gloom. The newly cut nib feels alien, sharp, a tiny weapon now poised to conquer the blankness. Then, the parchment. Your fingers trace the surface of the blank sheet waiting beside the worn manuscript you're to copy. It's surprisingly thick, slightly rough, with an underlying toughness. It feels alive, which it once was. Historians still argue whether the finest, smoothest vellum, from calfskin, was reserved solely for sacred texts or if wealthy patrons commissioned it for secular works too. This piece feels coarser, likely sheepskin, pecora. You run a thumb over a slight bump, a follicle where hair once grew. The skin side is smoother, paler. The flesh side is rougher, slightly more porous. Someone, somewhere, soaked, scraped, limed, stretched, and dried this hide on a frame under the sun and wind. You imagine the stench of the tannery, a world away from this hushed room. The parchment bears faint, almost invisible lines scored by a stylus or lead point. Your guide rails through the textual wilderness. It feels heavy with potential and heavy with dread. One mistake, one clumsy splash of ink, and hours of labor, both yours and the parchment maker's, could be ruined. A dark stain near the bottom edge, shaped vaguely like England, reminds you of the permanence of error here. There are no delete keys, only the knife's harsh mercy or the shameful blot. Finally, the ink. You lift the small clay pot. It's cool to the touch. Inside, the viscous liquid lies dark and still, smelling sharply metallic, like old blood and rust, with an underlying vinegar tang, iron gall ink. Mainstream historical fact. This was the medieval workhorse ink, made from oak galls, abnormal growths on oak trees caused by wasp larvae, ferrous sulfate, green vitriol, gum arabic as a binder, and water, often left to ferment. It flowed well, adhered fiercely to parchment, and darkened over time to a deep, enduring black. But it was also acidic, slowly eating into the very pages it preserved. You dip the tip of your newly cut quill into the pot. The ink clings to the slit, a dark bead trembling at the point. It's a delicate balance. Too much ink, and it blots. Too little, and the stroke fades. You hold the quill poised over the parchment, the ink droplets swelling slightly. The candlelight glints on its dark surface. The silence in the scriptorium feels deeper now, expectant. Brother Anselm's quill scratches rhythmically nearby, a tiny, persistent sound against the vast quiet. Your own breath feels loud. The tools are ready, the knife for correction, the quill for creation, the parchment for reception, the ink for permanence. You are the conduit. The first stroke is always the hardest, a leap of faith into the void of the page. That droplet of ink holds the weight of centuries, the echo of every monk who ever sat shivering in a room like this, wrestling meaning onto skin in the dead of night. Your hand hovers. The cold seeps deeper. The candle flame dips, recovers. The night holds its breath. Time to make your mark. Section 4. Your quill hovers, a dark droplet of ink trembling at its tip, poised to break the parchment's blank surface. Just as you commit to the downward stroke, a shadow falls across your desk. You freeze. Brother Librarian stands beside you, a gaunt silhouette against the candlelight. He moves with a ghost silence, his own breath barely stirring the air. In his hands, cradled like a sleeping child, lies the manuscript. This isn't just a book, it's a relic, a fragile vessel of words that have outlasted empires. He places it before you with a reverence usually reserved for the Eucharist. The thud it makes, muffled yet profound, isn't loud, but it echoes in the scriptorium's silence like a heartbeat. Heads lift briefly, quills still. Even Brother Anselm pauses, his eyes flicking toward the treasure now in your care. The manuscript is heavier than it looks, bound in time-worn oak boards warped by centuries of damp. Cold radiates from its cover, seeping into your fingertips. The leather, once supple, is now cracked and brittle, the color of dried blood. Faint tooling, a cross, perhaps, or interlaced knots, is almost erased by age and handling. Mainstream historical fact. Many precious codices were chained to desks or lecterns in monastic libraries, bibliotheca, not out of paranoia, but necessity. A single volume like this could represent a year's labor for a skilled scribe and was worth more than a peasant's farm. This one bears no chain tonight. Its safety rests solely on your trembling hands and the sanctity of silence. You run a finger along the spine, feeling the raised bands where thick cords hold the gatherings of parchment together. The smell hits you. Dust, yes, but beneath it, the ghost of tannin, aged animal hide, and something faintly fungal, like a forgotten cellar. You open the cover slowly. The hinges groan a soft protest. Inside, the parchment pages are uneven, some creamy white, others yellowed like old teeth, all bearing the subtle texture of the animal's life, veins, follicle patterns, even the occasional scar. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some scribes swore they could identify the region, even the specific flock of sheep used for vellum by the texture alone. A marginal note in one Flemish manuscript allegedly claimed, "This page came from a stubborn ewe who kicked Brother Giles thrice." Your own pages feel anonymous, mute witnesses to forgotten pastures. The text itself is a dense forest of black ink. The script is Carolingian minuscule, clear, rounded, and mercifully legible compared to earlier, more jagged hands, but it swims before your tired eyes. Abbreviations litter the lines like cryptic road signs, and Foret, a looping Q for Kia, a thorny hash for that. It's a shorthand born of necessity, saving precious space and time. Historians still argue whether the intense veneration shown to such manuscripts stemmed purely from their sacred content, or if it also reflected their staggering material value, a fusion of spiritual and economic awe. Was it the word of God, or the weight of the gold leaf used in its capitals, that made hearts race? You turn a page carefully. A corner crumbles slightly under your touch, leaving a tiny snowdrift of parchment fragments on the desk. Your stomach clenches. Damage feels like sacrilege. Near the bottom, a dark, greasy stain spreads across several lines, centuries-old candle wax or monkish soup. Someone long ago attempted to scrape it away, leaving the text beneath scarred but readable. In the margin, a tiny doodle, a frowning face with horns, drawn in faded brown ink. Was it boredom? A moment of rebellion? A charm against the devil lurking in difficult passages? The candlelight flickers, making the inked eyes seem to blink. The weight of responsibility settles on your shoulders, heavier than the oak boards. You aren't just copying words. You're becoming a link in a chain stretching back to the author who first penned these lines, perhaps in a sun-drenched Mediterranean courtyard, blissfully unaware his work would be copied by shivering men in a fog-bound isle centuries later. Every stroke of your quill must honor that chain. One mistake, a skipped line, a misread abbreviation, could ripple through time, corrupting prayers, altering doctrine. The silence of the scriptorium now feels charged, watchful. The saints in the shadows lean closer. Brother librarian hasn't moved. He watches your hands, his expression unreadable. Is it scrutiny or shared dread? He points a bony finger, its nail blackened with old ink, to a specific folio near the middle. Hic incipit, he murmurs, his voice a dry rasp like parchment rubbing stone. Here begins. But it's not the beginning. It's a dense passage of theological argument, and crucially, the rubricated note in the margin instructs, retroscribendum estimated, to be written backward. Your heart sinks. Not tonight. Not with eyes already straining and fingers stiff with cold. Brother librarian's gaze lingers for a moment longer, then he melts back into the gloom, leaving you alone with the ancient text, the demanding note, and the ink still trembling, unshed, on your quill. The blank sheet beside the manuscript waits, accusingly pristine. The sacred task has arrived. The backward night begins. Section 5. The words retroscribendum ist hang in the air like a curse. Backward. Not just the letters reversed, but the very flow of thought inverted. Your gaze darts from the marginal note to the thick iron gall ink in its clay pot. That smell, sharp as broken blood vessels, metallic as a battlefield, suddenly pulls you into memory. It wasn't always ready-made. Just this afternoon, you were hunched over a different kind of labor in the dim storeroom behind the kitchen, far from the scriptorium's hushed reverence. Mainstream historical fact, iron gall ink required precise alchemy. First, the oak galls, those knobby, tumor-like growths scraped from tree bark where wasps had stung the oak into nurturing their young. You recall crushing them with a mortar, the brittle shells yielding to reveal a fibrous, tannin-rich pulp that stained your fingers sepia. Then the green vitriol, ferrous sulfate, bought at great cost from an itinerant trader who claimed it was mined from dragon's bones beneath Cyprus. You'd stirred it into rainwater in a stone basin, watching the water turn sickly yellow-green. Adding the powdered galls was like witnessing decay in reverse, the murky brew darkening instantly to a deep, venous purple. Quirky or fringe tidbit, some monks insisted the ink's potency depended on the phase of the moon. Brother Cedric swore by adding 3 drops of bat's blood under a waning crescent for infallible blackness, though the abbot called it pagan nonsense. You'd used rainwater collected during Lent instead, whispering a psalm as you stirred. The final ingredient, gum arabic, golden tears oozing from acacia trees in lands you'd never see. Dissolving it felt sinful, like melting sunlight. You dripped it slowly into the brew, thickening the ink to honeyed darkness. Historians still argue whether scribes understood the ink's corrosive nature. Did they know this eternal black would, over centuries, eat through the very parchment it adorned? Or was it a devil's bargain? Clarity now for oblivion later? The smell in the storeroom had been overwhelming. Vinegar, rust, and something vegetal and rotten. You'd covered the pot with linen, hiding it in a cool niche to ferment. "Let it sleep," Brother Librarian had said. "Angry ink makes angry letters." Now, back at your desk, the ink is wide awake. That same acrid scent pulls you violently into the present. The manuscript's backward command taunts you. You dip your quill, the ink clinging with viscous reluctance. Across the aisle, Brother Anselm's quill moves in steady, rhythmic scratches. Forward, always forward. His candlelight pools like liquid gold on his page. Yours gutters, threatening collapse. You take a shaky breath and touch the quill to your blank parchment. Start simple, you think. A single word, Deus. God. But backward, Sud. The letters rebel. Your hand moves left instead of right, the quill's tip catching on the rough flesh side of the vellum. The S emerges spidery and malformed, the U a cramped afterthought. It looks less like sacred text and more like a child's secret code. Fatigue isn't helping. Your eyes blur. The candle flame splits into twin orbs. You blink hard, and the dancing light throws monstrous, elongated shadows of your hands onto the wall, a puppet show of futility. Mainstream historical fact: writing backward wasn't entirely unheard of. Leonardo da Vinci, centuries later, would famously use it for secrecy. But here, now, in a Benedictine scriptorium, the only secret is your growing despair. You glance at the rubricated note again. Was this punishment for dropping that psalter last week? Or some obscure liturgical requirement? Quirky or fringe tidbit, a marginal gloss in a 10th century Breton manuscript claims backward writing confused demons drawn to sacred words at night. They'd read Sanctus as Sutners and flee, baffled. You doubt any self-respecting demon would be thwarted by clumsy penmanship. Still, you press on. The next word, lux. Light. Backward, Zul. The X is a disaster. Two crossed lines swimming in a blob of ink. You grab the stale bread eraser, pressing it frantically. It lifts only a fraction of the stain. Now Zul looks like it's bleeding. A low groan escapes you. Brother Anselm pauses mid-stroke, his eyes flicking to your ruined page. No sympathy there, just the weary judgment of a man battling his own demons. The cold deepens. Your toes are numb blocks inside your sandals. Somewhere beyond the shuttered window, an owl shrieks. The sound slices through the silence, raw and primal. Historians still argue whether nocturnal copying aimed to mirror Christ's agony in Gethsemane or was simply a practical theft of quiet hours. Right now, it feels like both, a vigil in a freezing garden of vellum. You recut your quill, the knife scraping loud in the hush. The fresh nib glistens. One more attempt. Not a word this time. A single letter, A. Backward, it's still A. A small victory. You exhale. The ink flows smoother now, a perfect, defined mirror. Maybe, just maybe, you can survive this backward night. Section 6. The single backward glistens on the parchment like a tiny, hard-won island. Buoyed by this microscopic victory, you plunge back into the sea of inverted text. Dominus becomes Sunimod. Your hand moves leftward in jerky, unnatural strokes. The quill feels alien, a traitorous thing fighting your grip. Muscle memory screams in protest. Every instinct forged by years of writing Latin demands rightward motion, the natural flow of thought from beginning to end. This reversal feels like walking backward through mud, exhausting, disorienting, and deeply unnatural. Mainstream historical fact: the vast majority of scribal work reinforced neuromuscular patterns through sheer repetition. Studies of medieval manuscripts show consistent stroke sequences and letter forms within scriptoria, proof of deeply ingrained habits. Breaking this pattern wasn't just difficult, it was a neurological rebellion. Your wrist aches. A knot tightens between your shoulder blades. You force your eyes back to the manuscript. The letters swim. Fatigue isn't just a feeling now. It's a physical presence, a thick fog blurring the crisp Carolingian minuscule. The candlelight, your sole ally, becomes your tormentor. It flickers constantly, making shadows leap and dance across the page. The black ink strokes seem to writhe like tiny serpents. Spiritus stares back. Backward, scriptorium. You break it down. Asterisk SUTI per star. Each letter requires conscious, agonizing effort. Your fingers cramp around the quill shaft. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some exhausted scribes reportedly resorted to chewing bitter herbs like rue or betony to ward off sleep and sharpen vision, believing them gifts from Saint Bartholomew, patron of neurological maladies. The taste, described as like licking a tombstone, was surely its own penance. You swallow, imagining the acrid burn, but have only stale air and the ever-present metallic tang of the ink. The silence of the scriptorium, once a mantle of focus, now hums with phantom sounds. Is that the distant murmur of plainsong from the chapel? Or just the blood rushing in your own ears? Brother Anselm's rhythmic scratching seems amplified, each stroke a tiny hammer blow inside your skull. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, scratch. A drop of sweat, cold despite the pervasive chill, trickles down your temple. You wipe it away with an ink-stained sleeve, leaving a faint grey smear on your cheek. Historians still argue whether the high incidence of errors and bizarre marginalia in late-night manuscripts stemmed purely from exhaustion, or if the isolation and sensory deprivation of the scriptorium induced genuine, temporary dissociative states. Was it just tired eyes and numb fingers? Or did the flickering candlelight and endless quiet open a door to something else? You focus back on the vellum. Your backward scriptorium looks drunken, the letters tilting at odd angles, the spacing erratic. The P resembles a wilted flower. Despair creeps in, colder than the stone floor. Why this? Why now? Was the original scribe centuries ago copying another backward text? Is this some elaborate, centuries-long monastic prank? Or is it, as the marginal gloss suggested, truly a shield against nocturnal fiends? You glance nervously at the deep shadows pooling in the corners of the scriptorium. The statue of the stern saint near the door seems to watch you with greater intensity. Could a demon really be confused by scriptorium? The thought feels absurd, yet in the dead of night, surrounded by whispering parchment and dancing shadows, absurdity gains a strange weight. Your hand trembles. The quill nicks the parchment, leaving a tiny, white scar on the surface. A gasp escapes you, too loud. Heads turn. Brother Librarian, seemingly materializing from the gloom itself, stands at your shoulder. His eyes, deep-set and dark, scan your work. He sees the struggling scriptorium, the clumsy zull still faintly visible beneath its breadcrumb erasure, the fresh nick. He says nothing for a long moment. The silence is excruciating. Then, with a finger as dry as parchment, he taps the manuscript. Not the text, but a small, almost invisible mark beside the rubricated instruction. A tiny drawing of a candle, its flame tilted sideways. Understanding dawns, slow and painful. It wasn't just what to copy, but how to illuminate the space. The backward writing wasn't the only instruction. The tilted candle, it meant the light source. You'd been copying with your candle on the right, casting shadows across the backward letters you were trying to form, making the angles even harder to judge. Mainstream historical fact: scriptoria often had strict rules about candle placement to minimize shadows and eye strain. Some even used polished metal reflectors. Brother Librarian silently lifts your clay candle dish and moves it to the left side of your desk. The light now falls differently. The shadows shift. The backward letters on the manuscript seem clearer, less like traps. He doesn't smile. He simply melts back into the darkness, leaving you with a rearranged light and a sliver of renewed, albeit weary, hope. You reposition your stiff body, your numb fingers finding the quill again. The cold bites deep. The night is endless. But the candle is on the left. You take a breath that feels like shards of ice in your lungs, dip the quill, and begin again. S-U-T-I. The strokes are still clumsy, still fighting years of habit, but the shadows no longer fight you. One backward word at a time, under the watchful eye of saints and maybe demons, the vigil continues. Section 7. The relocated candle is a small revolution. Light now falls cleanly across the manuscript page, illuminating the backward letters without casting treacherous shadows from your moving hand. The relief is immediate, physical. For a few precious minutes, The work flows, not smoothly, never smoothly backward, but with less resistance. Sanctus becomes Sutnas, the letters forming with a hesitant, angular grace. Your quill moves leftward, the ink flowing in a steady, dark trickle. Hope, fragile as the candle flame itself, flickers in your chest. Perhaps this backward night won't break you. Then, the cramp hits. It starts as a dull ache in the base of your thumb, a familiar herald of trouble. You ignore it, flexing your fingers subtly. You're on the third backward word of a dense theological sentence, mysterium transforming into mueretzim. Then requires 3 distinct downward strokes, reversed. Halfway through the second stroke, the cramp ignites. It's a white-hot vice clamping down on the muscles of your thumb and the fleshy mound beneath it. Your hand spasms violently, involuntarily jerking the quill sideways. A thick, jagged line of ink tears across the parchment, obliterating half of MUI and scarring the pristine margin. Mainstream historical fact: repetitive strain injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome and debilitating hand cramps, scribal palsy, were endemic among medieval copyists. The unnatural posture, the constant pressure of gripping the quill, and the fine motor control required for hours on end took a brutal toll. Treatments ranged from poultices of comfrey and hog's lard to enforced rest, a luxury rarely granted against scriptorium quotas. You drop the quill as if burned, clutching your throbbing hand to your chest. The knuckles feel locked, the tendons like taut, frozen wires. Tears of pain and frustration sting your eyes. Across the aisle, Brother Anselm pauses, his gaze drawn by your sharp intake of breath. His own hand, you notice, is curled into a permanent half-claw, fingers thickened at the joints. A veteran's scars. You force your fingers open, groaning softly at the painful release. Massaging the knot of muscle brings little relief. The ruined line of ink mocks you. Quirky or fringe tidbit: some monastic infirmarians prescribed soaking cramped hands in the urine of a young boy, believed to possess restorative vital heat absent in the aged or infirm. Whether it was the warmth, the salts, or sheer distraction from the smell, some scribes swore by it. You flex your hand experimentally. Agony lances through it. Urine therapy seems suddenly, bizarrely plausible. Instead, you reach for the small lump of stale bread, pressing it onto the worst of the ink scar. It lifts a little, leaving a murky grey smear like a storm cloud over your ruined muir. The cramp subsides to a deep, throbbing ache, but it leaves your hand weak and trembling. Picking up the quill feels like lifting a stone. Your grip is tentative, fearful of triggering another spasm. You try to recapture the rhythm, but the backward flow is shattered. Every stroke is hesitant, a negotiation with pain. Your shoulder now joins the chorus of complaint, a knot tightening near your neck blade. You hunch further over the desk, trying to relieve the pressure, only making it worse. Historians still argue whether the chronic physical deformities seen in skeletal remains of identified scribes were seen as badges of pious endurance, occupational hazards, or hidden sources of shame in communities valuing bodily wholeness as a reflection of spiritual order. Did Brother Anselm see his clawed hand as a mark of devotion or a daily curse? Beyond the hand, the exhaustion deepens its roots. Your eyes, already strained from squinting at the minuscule script by flickering light, begin to play tricks. The backward letters seem to shimmer and pulse. The dense black text on the manuscript page blurs, then resolves into strange patterns. For a dizzying moment, the word veritas, truth, backward as sativev, seems to rearrange itself into the face of a scowling gargoyle. You blink rapidly, shaking your head. The gargoyle dissolves back into tangled letters. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the cold. It mixes with the dust on your skin, creating gritty streaks. A drop escapes, plummeting toward the parchment. You snatch your hand sideways, intercepting it with the back of your wrist just before it lands. The near miss sends your heart hammering against your ribs. Ink stains mingle with sweat on your skin. You are becoming part manuscript yourself, stained, cramped, and increasingly illegible. The cold, once a constant background hum, now bites with renewed vigor. It seems to seep up from the stone floor, through the thin stool, and into your bones. Your feet are numb blocks. You shift, trying to restore circulation, and your spine crackles like dry kindling. Every joint protests. The simple act of breathing feels laborious. The candle flame gutters wildly, throwing frantic shadows. Brother Anselm stifles a yawn, a cavernous opening that reveals missing teeth. Even his steady rhythm is slowing. The silence isn't just quiet, it's thick with shared suffering, the unspoken language of bodies pushed beyond their limits in service to words meant to transcend them. You glance at the high window slit. Still utter blackness. Dawn is a myth. Matins must be approaching. The thought of the cold chapel, the chanting, the stone floor on your knees, feels like a sentence. Your hand trembles over the ink pot. The backward night stretches on, measured not in hours, but in throbbing muscles, blurring vision, and the slow, cold seep of despair into your marrow. The only truth right now is the ache. Section 8. The silence, thick as vellum, finally cracks. Not with a shout, but with a sound almost more jarring. A low, wet cough rattles from Brother Anselm's chest. It's a harsh, involuntary bark that shreds the fragile membrane of quiet. He hunches over his desk, shoulders shaking, one ink-stained hand pressed to his mouth, trying desperately to smother the next spasm. The sound echoes off the vaulted ceiling, raw and human in this space dedicated to the ethereal. Heads snap up. Eyes wide in the guttering candlelight register not annoyance, but shared dread. A cough here feels like sacrilege, a bodily betrayal of the scriptorium's sacred hush. You freeze, your own backward struggle momentarily forgotten. Brother Anselm fights for control, his breath coming in ragged gasps that sound unnaturally loud. The cough subsides, leaving him trembling, a sheen of sweat visible on his pale forehead even in the dim light. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, leaving a dark smear. The silence rushes back in, heavier now, charged with the unspoken awareness of shared frailty. Mainstream historical fact: respiratory illnesses were rampant in cold, damp, crowded monastic environments. Chronic coughs, bronchitis, and even tuberculosis were constant companions, exacerbated by poor ventilation, meager diets, and relentless exposure to candle smoke and parchment dust. Health was a precarious gift, easily lost. Then, another sound, a faint, rhythmic scritch-scratch. Not a quill. It comes from the novice, Brother Cuthbert, 2 desks down. He's hunched over, furtively rubbing the sole of his worn sandal against the stone floor beneath his stool. Trying to dislodge a pebble, perhaps, or ease an itch born of cold and inactivity. The tiny sound, magnified by the silence, feels like an avalanche. Brother Librarian, a wraith near the door, turns his head slowly. His gaze, sharp as a quill knife, pins Brother Cuthbert. The novice flinches, stopping instantly, his face flushing crimson. The message is clear: endure the discomfort. Silence is the true mortification tonight. Quirky or fringe tidbit: some exhausted or bored scribes developed elaborate, silent communication systems using ink blots or subtle finger taps on the desk. A smudge near a specific word might signal help with this abbreviation, while 3 faint taps could mean abbot approaching. Was it collaboration or coded rebellion? Brother Anselm, recovered slightly, catches your eye. His gaze flicks meaningfully toward his own manuscript, then down to his inked pot. He dips his quill unnecessarily deep, then lifts it, allowing a single, fat droplet of ink to fall onto a scrap of waste parchment. He subtly nudges the scrap towards the edge of his desk facing you. On it, the droplet has spread into a shape vaguely resembling a question mark. His eyebrows lift infinitesimally. How goes the backward war? You stare at the ink blot. The audacity of it. Communication. Here. You risk a glance at Brother Librarian, now apparently absorbed in inspecting a shelf. Quickly, you dip your own quill, letting a smaller droplet fall onto your own scrap. You nudge it with the tip of your knife, elongating it slightly. It looks like a slumped figure, a dying candle. You're not sure, but you push it towards the aisle edge. Brother Anselm's lips twitch, almost imperceptibly. He dips his quill again, makes a swift, tiny mark beside his blot, a sharp upward tick. Persevere. The exchange takes seconds, a silent lifeline thrown across the chasm of enforced quiet. Historians still argue whether the strict silence enforced in many scriptoria was primarily a spiritual discipline, guarding against idle talk and distracting the spirit, or a pragmatic measure to maintain focus and minimize errors in painstaking, expensive work? Did the rule crush camaraderie, or did it forge a deeper, wordless bond through shared hardship? The fragile connection shatters as Brother Cuthbert shifts his weight again. His stool leg scrapes the flagstone with a teeth-jarring screech. Brother Librarian is upon him instantly, materializing like a shadow. He doesn't speak. He simply places a single, bony finger on the edge of Brother Cuthbert's desk. The pressure is light, but the meaning is crushing. Silence. Absolute. The novice shrinks into himself, looking ready to vanish into his coarse habit. The older monk lingers for a moment, his eyes sweeping the room. They pass over your desk, over the ink blots on the scraps near the aisle. Does he see? Does he know? His expression remains impassive, carved from the same stone as the saints in the alcoves. He turns and glides away. The silence reasserts itself, colder and more brittle than before. Brother Anselm stares resolutely at his page. Brother Cuthbert is a statue of mortification. You look down at your own backward scrawl. Misericordia, mercy, stares back, demanding to become a drossasim. The word feels like a cruel joke. Mercy is in short supply here tonight. The cramp in your hand pulses a dull reminder. Your eyes burn. The cold has settled so deep into your core you feel hollow. The brief, wordless communion with Brother Anselm only underscores the crushing isolation now. The wind finds the crack in the window shutter again, whistling a thin, mournful tune. It sounds like the monastery itself sighing. You pick up your quill. It feels heavier than lead. You dip it, the ink clinging like tar. You force your trembling hand towards the parchment, aiming for the next backward letter. The silence is no longer just an absence of sound. It's a physical weight pressing down, a suffocating blanket woven from cold, exhaustion, and the unyielding expectation of perfect, silent labor. Every scratch of your quill now sounds deafening, a tiny rebellion against the void. I.D. Each stroke is agony. Each stroke is defiance. The backward night grinds on, measured in stifled coughs, furtive glances, and the slow, painful unfurling of mirrored words on unforgiving skin. Mercy, indeed. Section 9. The silence, that heavy, suffocating blanket woven from cold and enforced quiet, finally finds its counterpoint. Not in words, but in a sound that cuts deeper than any cough or stool scrape, the distant, resonant tolling of a bell. Bong, bong, bong. 3 slow, sonorous notes, vibrating through the stone walls, seeping into your bones, shaking the very air in the scriptorium. Matins. The night office. It's not a summons. It's an inevitability. A wave of movement ripples through the frozen scribes. Quills are laid down with a finality that feels like surrender. Ink pots are stoppered. Manuscripts are gently closed, precious pages protected. The sudden cessation of scratching quills leaves a void filled only by the fading echo of the bell and the collective rustle of coarse wool habits as monks rise stiffly from their stools. Joints crackle like snapping twigs. The air fills with soft groans, suppressed yawns, the shuffle of numb feet on cold stone. The sacred labor is paused, but the sacred obligation continues. Mainstream historical fact: the divine office, particularly the night hours of matins and lauds, was the non-negotiable heartbeat of monastic life. Benedict's rule demanded it, nihil operi Dei preponita, let nothing be preferred to the work of God. Sleep, warmth, even the vital task of preserving knowledge, yielded to the rhythm of communal prayer. The bell's call was absolute. You push back your own 3-legged stool, the screech of wood on stone jarring in the sudden activity. Your cramped hand protests as you carefully close the manuscript, its oak boards cold and heavy. The backward a drossasim, mercy, remains unfinished, a testament to the interruption. You glance at Brother Anselm. His massaging his clawed hand, his face gaunt and shadowed in the guttering candlelight. He catches your eye and gives the faintest, almost imperceptible shrug. What can you do? The scriptorium empties quickly, silently. Monks file towards the door, a procession of shadows. The candles are left burning, a necessary risk, an island of light in the vast, cold darkness awaiting your return. Extinguishing and relighting them all would waste precious time and tallow. Brother Librarian stands sentinel by the door, ensuring no stray parchment is disturbed, his eyes missing nothing. You join the shuffling line. The cold of the corridor hits like a physical blow after the comparative stillness of the scriptorium. It's a deeper cold, damp and penetrating. Your thin habit feels utterly inadequate. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some frugal monasteries reportedly employed candle-snuffing novices whose sole duty during offices was to dart between scriptoria and chapels, extinguishing candles during prayers and relighting them just before the monks returned, a dangerous, soot-stained ballet against time and monastic budget. Tonight, the flames hold their lonely vigil. You trudge down the familiar, shadowed corridor towards the chapel. The flagstones are icy beneath your thin sandals. Your empty stomach clenches, a hollow ache echoing the bell's toll. Supper, that meager bowl of pottage and gritty bread, feels like a half-remembered dream. Ahead, the chapel door stands open, spilling a soft, flickering light into the gloom. The scent changes, cold stone remains, but now overlaid with the faint, sweet smoke of incense and the waxy smell of many burning tapers. The sound of low chanting begins to swell. Domin, labia mea aperis. O Lord, open my lips. A deep, rhythmic murmur that seems to resonate from the stones themselves. Historians still argue whether the sheer physical ordeal of rising for prolonged prayer in the dead of night, after hours of meticulous labor, deepened spiritual fervor through shared suffering, or merely bred exhaustion and resentment hidden beneath bowed heads and chanted psalms. Was the fatigue a form of penance, or did it hollow out the prayers into rote repetition? You step across the threshold into the chapel. The air is marginally warmer, thick with the breath and body heat of dozens of men, but the chill radiating from the stone floor quickly seeps through your souls. Rows of monks already stand in their stalls, dark shapes against the candlelit apse. Their breath mists in the air. The chanting grows louder, enveloping you. Et os meum annunciabit laudum tuam. And my mouth shall declare your praise. You find your place in the choir stall. The wood is frigid, polished smooth by generations of habit-clad backsides. You stand, bowing your head automatically, your lips forming the familiar responses. Deus in adiutorium meum intend. O God, come to my assistance. The Latin flows, a comforting rhythm, but your body screams its protests. Your cramped hand throbs. Your back aches from hours hunched over the desk. Your eyes, strained by the dim candlelight and the backward text, feel gritty and dry. The incense smoke stings them further. Hunger gnaws, a persistent animal in your gut. The chanting becomes a drone, a wall of sound you lean against rather than join with full voice. Mainstream historical fact: the night office could last over an hour, involving lengthy readings, multiple psalms, and hymns. Standing for such duration on cold stone, after a night of labor and before returning to it, was an endurance test. You glance sideways. Brother Anselm sways slightly, his eyes half closed. Brother Cuthbert stifles a yawn so wide it threatens to unhinge his jaw. The abbot, a stern figure at the front, chants with unwavering vigor, but even he looks carved from ice. The candles on the high altar flicker, their light dancing on the painted faces of saints who seem to watch with detached serenity. Your own prayer feels thin, insubstantial, lost in the vast, cold space and the overwhelming fatigue. Are you praising God, or merely enduring the ritual? The warmth of your bed, the idea of sleep, becomes a near hallucinatory temptation. You long for horizontal stillness, for darkness without the pressure of sacred words or backward letters. The office grinds on. Psalms blend into readings, readings into responses. Time loses meaning. Your knees ache from standing. Your feet are numb. The incense is cloying. The chant becomes a lullaby you must fight. You pinch the skin on the back of your hand, the sharp pain a momentary anchor against the tide of exhaustion. Focus. Persevere. The words of the psalm echo ironically, Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Our help is in the name of the Lord. Your help feels very far away. The backward manuscript awaits your return, a task unfinished under guttering candles. Matins isn't respite, it's merely a shift in the nature of the vigil. from silent struggle with words to vocal struggle against the crushing weight of the night and your own failing body. The bells will eventually ring again, releasing you back to the scriptorium's cold embrace and the mocking, mirrored text. Mercy remains elusive, both on the page and in the bone-deep weariness that is now your constant companion. Section 10. The final Amen hangs in the chapel's chilled air, less a declaration of faith and more a collective gasp of relief. The abbot's benediction is a blur of Latin syllables lost in the shuffle of stiff limbs and the scrape of wooden stalls. The warmth generated by dozens of bodies packed together dissipates instantly as you step back into the corridor. It's like diving into an icy stream. The relative fug of the chapel, incense, breath, candle wax, is replaced by the scriptorium's familiar cocktail: cold stone, dust, and the faint, ever-present tang of vinegar and ink. You shuffle back towards the oak door, feet dragging, the brief illusion of communal warmth utterly shattered. The tolling bell wasn't a reprieve. It was an intermission in a play starring exhaustion. Mainstream historical fact: the Benedictine rule strictly regulated diet: 1 main meal a day in winter, 2 in summer, with no meat from 4-footed animals, except for the sick. Staples were coarse bread, vegetable pottage, often just boiled greens and grains, legumes like lentils or peas, cheese, eggs, and fish on feast days. Fasting was frequent. Tonight's supper, a thin broth tasting faintly of turnips and sorrow, accompanied by bread dense enough to stun a small rodent, feels like a cruel memory. Your stomach, ignored during the focused agony of backward writing and the drone of matins, now roars back to life. It's not a mere pang, it's a cavernous, gnawing void. A low, resonant gurgle erupts from your midsection, echoing off the corridor walls with embarrassing clarity. Brother Cuthbert, ahead of you, flinches. Brother Anselm doesn't turn, but his shoulders tense slightly. Hunger is the uninvited guest at every monastic table, and tonight it's shouting. You push open the scriptorium door. The air inside is even colder than the corridor, stagnant and sharp. The candles left burning during matins have guttered lower, some drowning in their own wax, casting even longer, more distorted shadows. The light they offer feels thinner, more desperate. You reclaim your stool, the wood biting into your thighs with renewed malice. Your unfinished backward scrawl, A Drossasim, mercy, waits on the parchment, looking more like a taunt than a word. Your stomach clenches again, a sharp, hollow spasm. Quirky or fringe tidbit, some resourceful or desperate, monks reportedly kept secret stashes of dried fish or pilfered honeycomb hidden in hollowed-out books or behind loose stones. The infirmarian stores of figs or almonds were particularly tempting targets for midnight raids. You glance at the heavy manuscript cover. Could it hide a morsel? Unlikely. Tonight, the only hidden thing is your desperation. The silence resumes, heavier now, layered over the thunder of your own hunger. Every small sound seems amplified. The crackle of cooling wax, the sigh of the wind finding the window crack, the gurgle of Brother Anselm's own rebellious stomach answering yours across the aisle. It becomes a silent duet of deprivation. You pick up your quill. It feels alien, unwelcome. Dipping it in the ink pot requires effort. The iron gall scent, usually sharp and purposeful, now mingles unpleasantly with the phantom aroma of roasted meat, of buttered bread, of anything substantial. Your mind treacherously conjures images. A steaming bowl of thick stew, a wheel of ripe cheese, even the coarse oatcakes your mother baked, dense but blessedly filling. The memory is a physical ache. Historians still argue whether the constant, controlled hunger experienced by medieval monks was primarily a spiritual discipline, a mortification of the flesh to focus the spirit, echoing Christ's fasting in the wilderness, or simply a harsh economic necessity for large communities living on often meager endowments and limited agricultural yields. Was the gnawing emptiness a pathway to God, or just the grinding reality of pre-industrial sustenance? Right now, as your hand trembles over the vellum, it feels like neither. It feels like a distraction, a physical barrier to the mental gymnastics required for backward copying. Misericordia demands focus, but your body screams for sustenance. The backward mew attempt is shaky, slanting drunkenly. You press too hard, the quill splatters, leaving an ugly blot. A soft, rhythmic thump-thump-thump starts up near Brother Librarian's desk. He's using a small wooden pestle, grinding something in a mortar. Pigment for rubrication, or Your hunger-addled brain latches onto the sound. Is it dried peas? Lentils? The rhythmic pounding becomes the drumbeat of your starvation. Thump, thump, thump. Food. Thump, thump, thump. Empty. You try to focus on the manuscript. The letters blur. The backward instruction retroscribendum ist seems to pulse. A wave of dizziness washes over you, cold sweat beading on your forehead despite the chill. The candle flames stretch into long, wavering needles. The frowning face doodled in the margin seems to leer, its horns more pronounced. Mainstream historical fact: chronic malnutrition, combined with eye strain from poor light and the demanding nature of scribal work, could lead to visual disturbances, headaches, and even hallucinations. Phenomena sometimes interpreted spiritually, visions or demonic temptations, rather than physiologically. You fumble for the small lump of stale bread on your desk, the eraser, not food. For a wild, shameful second, you consider putting it in your mouth. The gritty, inedible texture would be a poor substitute, but the action. Brother Anselm clears his throat softly, a dry rasp. You look up. He's holding a tiny, shriveled apple core, carefully concealed in his palm. He meets your gaze for a fraction of a second, then looks down, swiftly bringing the core to his lips, scraping the last vestiges of pulp from the seeds with his teeth before palming the remains again. The gesture is furtive, desperate, utterly human. A tiny, illicit communion with sweetness. The glimpse of his secret act shocks you back to your own reality. Hunger is the shared heresy, the universal weakness beneath the robes of piety. You grip your quill tighter, knuckles white. The cold is deepening as the night wears on, seeping into your marrow. The hunger is a living thing, twisting in your gut. The backward letters mock you. Dawn is still a myth whispered by the wind outside. Matins offered no mercy, only a reminder of the body's insistent animal needs. The only offering now is the empty page, the demanding text, and the long, cold stretch of hours until Lord's, where perhaps, a scrap of bread and a mouthful of weak ale might briefly silence the void. You force your trembling hand back towards the inkpot. The vigil continues, fueled now not just by faith or duty, but by the raw, gnawing engine of hunger. Mercy remains a word on a page, backward and out of reach. Section 11. The gnawing hunger is a constant drumbeat beneath the surface, a dull throb competing with the sharper symphony of pain playing across your body. But it's the deep, structural ache in your lower back that now commands your attention, rising above the chorus like a dissonant, grinding chord. Hours hunched over the unforgiving desk, perched on the torturous three-legged stool, have transformed your spine into a column of frozen agony. It's not a cramp, it's a deep, pervasive stiffness, a feeling that your vertebrae have fused together, locked in this unnatural, forward-curved posture. Every tiny shift sends jolts of protest radiating up into your shoulders and down through your hips. You try to straighten, just a fraction, seeking relief. The movement is excruciating. Muscles scream, tendons feel stretched to snapping. A gasp escapes your lips, too loud in the silence. Brother Anselm glances over, his own posture a permanent, defeated curve. His expression says it all: resistance is futile. You slump back into the hunched position, the lesser of two agonies. The backward adrocism, mercy, on your page blurs as tears of sheer physical frustration well in your eyes. You blink them away furiously, smudging a tiny patch of ink near the blot you created earlier. Mainstream historical fact: chronic back pain and spinal deformities were occupational hazards for medieval scribes, evidenced by skeletal remains showing advanced osteoarthritis and vertebral compression. The combination of poor posture, inadequate seating, and hours of static work created a slow, grinding torture. There were no ergonomic chairs, only penitential stools. The dryness in your eyes intensifies, a burning grit that makes focusing on the dense, backward script a Herculean task. Every blink feels like sandpaper scraping across your corneas. The candlelight, once merely inadequate, now feels actively hostile, a stinging, flickering glare that dances across the vellum's uneven surface. Quirky or fringe tidbit: remedies for scribe's eye ranged from the practical, rosewater washes, to the bizarre. Some manuscripts recommend placing cool, wet leeches on the temples, while others suggest nightly poultices of mashed dove's liver mixed with breast milk, believed to restore vital ocular humors. You'd settle for closing them for just 5 minutes. But stopping isn't an option. The backward text demands your gaze, your strained focus. You attempt another letter in a drossosim. The R, backward, requires a tricky upward curve. Your hand, still weak from the earlier cramp, trembles. The line wobbles, veers off course, ending in another microscopic ink blot. Frustration bubbles, hot and acrid. You stab the quill toward the bread eraser, but the movement twists your torso. White-hot pain lances through your lower back. You freeze, breath held, sweat beading on your upper lip despite the cold. It feels like a hot knife is lodged between your vertebrae. Historians still argue whether the chronic physical suffering endured by scribes was viewed primarily through a lens of pious endurance, offering up the pain to God, or as a purely occupational burden, silently resented. Did the promise of spiritual reward truly mitigate the grinding reality of a crippled hand or a ruined back? Brother Anselm's clawed fingers seem a silent testament to a lifetime of such offering. You try a different tactic, shifting your weight minutely on the stool. Bad idea. A nerve pinches sharply in your right buttock, sending a jolt down your leg. Your foot, already numb with cold, tingles violently. You bite down on the inside of your cheek, the coppery taste of blood a welcome distraction from the electric shock in your limb. The silence of the scriptorium feels like a vacuum, amplifying every ragged breath, every stifled whimper of pain. Across the aisle, Brother Cuthbert is surreptitiously rolling his shoulders, his face a mask of youthful discomfort. Even he is feeling it now. The candle on your left gutters wildly, threatening extinction. Its wax pool has overflowed the crude clay dish, cascading down the side in a frozen, yellowish waterfall. The light dims precipitously, plunging your manuscript page into deeper shadow. Panic flares. You can barely see the forward text, let alone decipher it backward in this gloom. Desperation overrides pain. You lean forward further, ignoring the scream from your spine, bringing your eyes dangerously close to the greasy, smoke-stained vellum. The smell of hot tallow and old parchment fills your nostrils. The backward letters swim, merge, dissolve into meaningless smudges. Mainstream historical fact: tallow candles, made from animal fat, were smoky, smelly, and notoriously unreliable. Beeswax candles burned cleaner and brighter but were prohibitively expensive, reserved for altars and the abbot's quarters. Scriptoria relied on the cheaper, dimmer tallow, its flickering light a constant battle against encroaching darkness and eye strain. Your straining eyes water uncontrollably now, blurring the text further. The dryness has given way to a stinging flood. You swipe at them with your sleeve, leaving inky streaks on your face. The pain in your back is a constant, deep-throated roar, underpinning the sharper stabs from your neck and shoulders. Your hand trembles so violently you have to clutch the quill with both hands to attempt the next stroke. It's too much. The backward C in a drossosim becomes a jagged, unrecognizable slash. You drop the quill. It rolls off the desk, clattering onto the stone floor. The sound is deafening. Every head in the scriptorium turns. Brother librarians gaze fixes on you, cold and assessing. Shame burns hotter than the pain. You scramble off the stool, a movement that sends fresh agony tearing through your back. You crouch, gasping, fumbling in the near darkness beneath the desk for the fallen quill. Your fingers brush cold stone, gritty dust, and finally, the smooth shaft of the feather. As you straighten, slowly, agonizingly, the world tilts. The vaulted ceiling seems to rush down, then swim away. The rows of desks warp and bend. The faces of the other monks blur into pale, judgmental ovals. You clutch the edge of the desk, knuckles white, fighting the wave of dizziness and nausea. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some monastic infirmary records describe scribes experiencing episodes of vertigo and visual disturbances attributed to humoral imbalances caused by excessive contemplation of minute details in foul air. Treatment involved bleeding, purging, and prayers to Saint Lucy. Right now, you feel profoundly imbalanced. You collapse back onto the stool, the quill clutched in your trembling, ink-stained hand. The candle flame steadies slightly, casting just enough light to see the ruined word on your page. A drossosim, mercy, is a battlefield of blots, shaky lines, and despair. Your back is a column of fire. Your eyes burn like coals. Your hand feels disconnected, clumsy. The cold has seeped so deep into your bones you feel brittle, ready to shatter. The backward night isn't just a mental challenge. It's a full-scale assault on your physical being, grinding you down letter by painful, mirrored letter. The body rebels, not with shouts, but with the relentless, grinding language of ache, tremor, and failing sight. The spirit might be willing, but the flesh is screaming its surrender into the suffocating, candlelit silence. Dawn feels less like salvation and more like a distant rumor whispered by the groaning stones. The only truth is the anchor of pain, rooting you to this stool, this desk, this impossible task. Section 12. The fallen quill retrieved, your trembling hand poised once more over the battlefield of Adrosocim, you realize the deepest wound isn't in your back or your eyes. It's in your mind. Hours of forcing thought into reverse have twisted your inner landscape. The simple act of thinking a word now feels treacherous. You mentally form lux, light, ready to inscribe its backward twin Zul, but your brain stutters. The letters *lux* float, disjointed, then scramble. XUL? ULX? The logical sequence rebels. It's like trying to walk up a down escalator. Every instinct fights the unnatural current. Mainstream historical fact. Neuroplasticity allows the brain to adapt, but forcing a deeply ingrained skill like writing, a complex interplay of language processing, fine motor control, and spatial awareness, into reverse for sustained periods induces significant cognitive dissonance. Studies on mirror writing suggest it engages distinct, less efficient neural pathways, demanding constant conscious effort that exhausts the mind far faster than normal writing. You dip the quill. Ink beads. You focus on the manuscript's veritas, truth. SATIREV? No. SATIVER? Your internal voice stammers, tripping over the inversion. The mental translation layer grinds, slow and laborious, each letter requiring individual retrieval and reversal before your hand can even attempt its shape. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some medieval medical texts attributed such mental confusion to phlegmatic humors overwhelming the brain, or even to malicious airs emanating from certain vellum types treated with questionable substances. Treatments involved inhaling pungent herbs like rosemary or sage to sharpen the wit, or wearing amulets containing lodestones to align disordered thoughts. You inhale deeply, catching only dust, ink, and cold. No sharpening occurs. The disorientation deepens. When you glance at Brother Anselm's forward-flowing script, the familiar left-to-right march feels alien, almost jarring. For a dizzying second, his writing looks backward. You blink rapidly. Reality wobbles. The candle flame splits into dancing doubles. The lines on the parchment seem to writhe, not with imagined gargoyles now, but with a fundamental wrongness. Is the word Deus, God, in the manuscript facing the right way? You have to consciously check, tracing the letters with a shaky finger, reassuring yourself that yes, for the original scribe, it flowed naturally. But for you tonight, even the sacred text feels subtly distorted, its sanctity undermined by your cognitive contortions. Historians still argue whether prolonged exposure to such mentally disorienting tasks was seen as a form of asceticism, a deliberate fracturing of the ego to achieve humility, or if it was merely an unintended, debilitating consequence of obscure liturgical demands. Did the abbot understand the mental toll, or was it just another labor like plowing a field? You attempt the next letter. It's an O for Adrosocim. Simple. Round. Backward, it's still a no. A tiny island of sanity. You form it, the ink flowing smoothly for once. A minuscule victory. But then comes the E. Backward, it's a mirror image, a shape your hand has never practiced, a form that feels intrinsically clumsy. Your fingers fumble. The curve collapses inward, looking more like a squashed beetle than a letter. Frustration wars with a creeping sense of unreality. You are not just copying text. You are dismantling your own thought processes and reassembling them inside out. The silence amplifies the chaos within. Brother Cuthbert sniffles. The sound, normally insignificant, feels like a shriek disrupting your fragile concentration. The rustle of vellum as Brother Anselm turns a page is a thunderclap. Your own heartbeat thrums in your ears, a frantic counter-rhythm to the slow, painful scratch of your quill. Time distorts. Minutes stretch into eons. Hours collapse into moments lost in the fog of mental effort. How long have you been wrestling with this single word? The matins bell feels like it rang in another lifetime. A wave of profound mental fatigue washes over you, distinct from the physical exhaustion. It's a hollowing out, a draining of cognitive reserves. Forming coherent thoughts about the text, its meaning, its theological weight, becomes impossible. You are reduced to the mechanics. See letter, reverse letter, form shape. The sacred content vanishes behind the sheer, grinding effort of the mirror act. You are machine grinding gears in reverse, sparks flying, threatening seizure. Mainstream historical fact. Cognitive overload from demanding, unfamiliar tasks impairs higher-order thinking and memory consolidation. The profound spiritual contemplation theoretically facilitated by copying scripture would have been severely hampered by the intense cognitive load of sustained backward writing, reducing the scribe to a state of near-automatic, error-prone transcription. You glance at the rubricated instruction, retro-scribendum estimated. The red letters seem to pulse with malevolent glee. Was this passage chosen because its dense theological arguments about the ineffable nature of God would be doubly obscured by the backward script? Is the confusion itself the point? A physical enactment of the impossibility of comprehending the divine? Or is it simply random cruelty? Your mind, too tired to sustain the question, lets it dissolve. The cold, the hunger, the back pain, they recede, not because they've lessened, but because your beleaguered brain simply lacks the bandwidth to process them fully. They become background noise to the central, screaming dissonance of reversed thought. The candlelight seems to dim further, or perhaps your mind is simply dimming its own lights to conserve energy. You finish the mangled E. A drossocym is almost complete, a testament to stubbornness rather than skill. Only the M remains. Backward, it's a series of jagged peaks, a mountain range of effort. You take a breath that feels like dredging sludge. Your mind feels like a frozen pond, thoughts trapped beneath the ice. You dip the quill. The backward night has stolen not just your comfort, but your very sense of mental order. You are adrift in a mirrored sea, clinging to the wreckage of a single, crooked word. Them awaits a final, exhausting climb. Section 13. The mangled of a drossocym bleeds into the vellum's grain, a Rorschach blot of exhaustion. Only the M remains. Backward, it's a fortress wall, 3 jagged peaks demanding ascent. Your mind, already stripped raw by the cognitive dissonance of reverse thought, feels hollowed out, a bell tolling in an empty chamber. You dip the quill. The iron gall ink clings, thick as congealed blood. You brace your trembling hand, ignoring the symphony of protest from your spine, your eyes, your cramped fingers. The first downward stroke for the backward and begins, a sheer cliff face. But something is different. Not easier, but detached. The agonizing mental translation, see letter, reverse letter, form shape, has burned itself out. A strange, numb automation takes hold. Your hand moves leftward, carving the angular strokes with a mechanical precision devoid of conscious thought. Stroke down. Stroke up left. Stroke down. Stroke upright. Stroke down. 3 peaks. Done. A drossocym stands complete, a crooked monument on the skin of a long-dead sheep. It looks alien, wrong, yet it's finished. The sheer, grinding effort has bypassed your conscious mind entirely. You are a vessel emptied of self, pouring only mirrored shapes onto the page. Mainstream historical fact. This state of dissociated flow, where complex motor tasks bypass conscious control after exhaustive repetition, is a documented neurological phenomenon. Medieval scribes likely experienced it during marathon copying sessions, their hands moving with a life of their own while the conscious mind drifted or prayed, a necessary detachment for enduring the physical and mental toll. You stare at the word. It means nothing. Mercy remains an abstract concept, lost in the mechanics of its inverted form. The numbness spreads, a welcome anesthetic against the body's persistent screaming. The cold radiating from the flagstones through your thin sandals. A distant hum. The gnawing hunger twisting your gut. A faint echo. The deep, Grinding ache in your fused feeling spine? A background vibration. Only the flickering candlelight holds your attention. Its dance now mesmerizing. The flame isn't just light. It's a living thing, pulsing, breathing, casting shapes that slide and merge in the corners of your vision. The shadows behind Brother Anselm's stooped form deepen, coalescing into something else. A hunched silhouette, darker than dark, with too many angles where shoulders should be. You blink. It resolves back into ordinary shadow. Just exhaustion. Just the numb automation taking hold. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Medieval bestiaries and monastic chronicles occasionally mention scriptorium shades. Not quite demons, but malignant presences drawn to the fatigue and spiritual tension of late-night copying. Some scribes reportedly kept sprigs of rowan or iron nails hidden in their desks as wards against these invisible watchers of the weary word. You don't have rowan. You have ink and numb terror. The shadow behind Anselm seems to ripple again. You force your gaze back to the manuscript. The next word, infernum, hell. Backward, munrefni. A bitter chuckle, silent and internal, threatens to bubble up. Of course. Your numb hand moves automatically. *MUNIFNI star. The strokes are clumsy but persistent, driven by the strange motor memory your exhaustion has forged. The numbness isn't peace. It's a precarious ledge over a chasm of raw panic. Every flicker of the candle, every groan of the wind in the shutter, feels amplified, pregnant with unseen menace. The air itself feels thicker, harder to breathe, as if the shadows are pressing in, stealing the oxygen. Historians still argue whether the frequent reports of nocturnal dread and perceived demonic presence in scriptoria stemmed purely from sleep deprivation and sensory distortion, or if the intense spiritual focus of the work, wrestling with sacred texts in the demonic hours, genuinely created a perceived battleground attracting preternatural attention. Was it physiology or piety that painted devils in the candle smoke? The backward F in munrefni goes awry, the crossbar slanting drunkenly downward. You reach for the bread eraser, but your numb fingers fumble. It rolls off the desk, landing silently on the rushes scattered over the stone floor. You stare at it. Bending seems an impossible feat, a journey into the shadowed depths beneath the desk where things might wait. The crooked F mocks you. Infernum. Hell. The numbness recedes a fraction, replaced by a cold prickle across your scalp. The shadow behind Brother Anselm seems to solidify, stretching tendrils towards his flickering candlelight. Is it just the draft? Is he seeing it? His quill moves steadily, but his posture seems stiffer, more defensive. You abandon the eraser. The blot remains. Hell is messy. You press on. Ni. The final strokes. Done. Munrefni sits below a drossosim, a crooked, blot-stained descent. The numbness reclaims you, a merciful tide washing over the sharp edges of fear. Your hand dips the quill again, moves to the next backward word. The automation holds. You are the hand. The hand writes. The mind observes from a foggy distance, registering the dancing shadows, the oppressive silence, the sense of being watched, as if through thick, warped glass. The cold isn't biting anymore. It's a neutral temperature. The hunger is a fact, not a feeling. The pain is a distant landscape. Brother Anselm shifts suddenly, a sharp intake of breath. His elbow knocks his ink pot. It teeters for a heart-stopping second before settling. A tiny splash of black venom stains his pristine vellum. He freezes, staring at the spreading stain with an expression of pure horror that pierces your numb detachment. The mundane accident feels apocalyptic in this charged silence. His eyes dart up, wide and white-ringed in the gloom, not towards Brother Librarian, but towards the deep shadows massing near the high window slit. He sees it too. The knowledge is a cold blade slipping between your ribs. It's not just exhaustion. The shadows are watching. The backward writing feels less like a chore and more like an incantation whispered into a void that's starting to whisper back. Your automated hand keeps moving, tracing the next mirrored letter, a fragile automaton in a room where the darkness is learning to breathe. The vigil isn't just against fatigue or cold anymore. It's against the things taking shape just beyond the guttering circle of candlelight, drawn perhaps by the inverted sacred words, or simply by the raw, vulnerable humanity shivering at the edge of the long, backward night. Section 14. The splash of Brother Anselm's ink echoes in the silence like a stone dropped into a still, black pool. Time fractures. The viscous black tide surges across his vellum, engulfing hours of meticulous forward script, sacred words dissolving into an expanding void. Anselm recoils as if burned, a choked gasp escaping him. His wide, white-rimmed eyes dart not towards the spilled ink, but past it, into the deeper shadows massing near the high window slit where the candlelight refuses to penetrate. The terror on his face is raw, unhidden. It confirms the cold dread coiling in your own numb belly. The shadows are watching. The spilled ink isn't just an accident. It feels like a sacrifice accepted. Mainstream historical fact: iron gall ink's corrosive nature was undeniable. Its acidic components, tannic acid from oak galls and sulfuric acid from green vitriol, actively ate into parchment over decades, sometimes burning holes through precious folios, a slow chemical fire consuming the words it was meant to preserve. Seeing it surge now, obliterating Anselm's work, feels like witnessing time itself accelerate. Sacred text devoured before your eyes by the very tool meant for its salvation. The sharp, metallic vinegar stench of the spilled ink cuts through the scriptorium's usual dust and tallow smells, acrid and aggressive. Movement. Brother Librarian materializes beside Anselm's desk, a spectre drawn by the scent of disaster. His gaunt face is impassive in the guttering light, but his eyes, reflecting the spreading black stain, hold a glacial fury. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence is condemnation enough. Anselm shrinks further, his trembling hands hovering uselessly over the ruin. The librarian produces a scrap of clean linen from within his sleeve, not to help, but to meticulously blot the edge of the spill, preventing its further advance onto the desk wood. He salvages nothing of the text. His duty is to the vessel, not the drowned message. The ruined vellum is left to its fate, a blackened island in a sea of potential words. Anselm's shoulders slump, defeated. The shadows behind him seem to pulse, satisfied. Quirky or fringe tidbit, some scriptoria practiced rituals to appease spilled ink, believing it housed restless spirits of the words destroyed. A drop of holy water might be flicked onto the stain, or a whispered psalm uttered over it, less for cleaning and more to lay the ink ghost to rest before it attracted worse company. Brother Librarian offers no such rites. His silence is colder than the stones. The stain spreads its final tendrils and stops, a permanent scar. The numbness that had cocooned you shatters. Awareness floods back, the bone-deep cold, the grinding ache in your spine, the hollow scream of your stomach, the gritty burn of your eyes, and now, this new layer, visceral, shared fear. The air feels charged, thick with unseen pressure. Every flickering candle casts writhing, elongated shadows that seem to reach beyond their natural boundaries. The rhythmic drip, drip, drip of excess ink falling from Anselm's desk onto the rushes below becomes the only sound, a morbid metronome marking the passage of this haunted hour. Drip. Is that a shape coalescing near the water barrel? Drip. Did the shadow by the door just lean forward? Drip. You force your gaze back to your own page. The backward Munrefni, hell, stares up, its blot a smaller sibling to Anselm's catastrophe. The next word awaits, tenebrae, darkness. Backward, urbanet. The irony is a physical blow. Darkness isn't just out there. It's in here, seeping into the very parchment, into your bones, into your mind. Your automated hand, momentarily stilled by the shock, feels leaden and alien. The comforting dissociation is gone, stripped away by the splash and the terror in Anselm's eyes. You have to consciously think again. E-A-R-B. The mental gears, rusted from exhaustion and fear, grind painfully. Historians still argue whether the pervasive medieval belief in literal demonic interference during sacred tasks was a genuine cultural perception or a psychological projection born of extreme fatigue, isolation, and the suggestive power of dim, flickering light. Did monks see demons, or did their exhaustion and dread create them from the raw material of shadow and silence? Tonight, the distinction feels meaningless. The presence is palpable. You dip your quill. The iron gall ink, identical to the pool now ruining Anselm's work, clings to the nib like tar. It feels heavier, more malevolent. Making the first backward stroke for Urbanet feels like carving a sigil inviting the encroaching shadows closer. The line wavers, weak and uncertain. Across the aisle, Anselm hasn't moved. He stares blankly at his ruined page, a man broken. Brother Librarian has vanished back into the gloom near the door, a silent sentinel radiating disapproval. The drip, drip, drip continues. It syncs with the frantic hammering of your own heart. Mainstream historical fact: the psychological impact of such accidents was profound. Ruining precious materials meant wasted resources, personal shame, potential penance, extra prayers, fasting, even physical discipline, and the crushing sense of failing in sacred duty. Anselm's stillness speaks volumes. It's the posture of a man awaiting judgment, both earthly and divine. You try another stroke. The Urbanet collapses into a blot. You flinch, half expecting Brother Librarian to rematerialize at your shoulder. Panic flutters in your chest. Is your ink pot next? Will your labor dissolve into a black void? You fumble for the bread eraser, remembering too late it rolled away. Desperation takes over. You use the edge of your coarse woolen sleeve, pressing it onto the wet ink. It lifts some, but mostly smears the blot into a wider, greyish smudge, dragging fibers from your sleeve into the mess. It looks worse. The word tenebrae, darkness, is now literally shrouded in grime. The shadows seem to thicken around your pool of candlelight, pressing inward. The cold intensifies, sharpening to an almost physical bite. Is it the draft from the window, or something else drawing warmth from the room? The drip, drip, drip from Anselm's desk sounds louder, slower, more deliberate. Your hand trembles violently. You clutch the quill tighter, knuckles white. The numbness is gone, replaced by raw, jangling nerves. The backward writing feels impossible again, the cognitive dissonance crashing back with the force of the spilled ink. Urbanet. Darkness. The letters swim, mock, threaten. Brother Anselm finally stirs. With infinite weariness, he picks up a fresh quill. He doesn't look at the ruined page. He opens a new gathering of parchment. He dips the quill. He begins again. Forward. Left to right. A silent act of defiance, or perhaps just surrender to the unending cycle. His clawed hand moves with painful slowness, but it moves. You look down at your own smeared battlefield. The shadows press closer. The cold bites deeper. The drip, drip, drip marks time like a failing heart. Anselm's scratch begins anew, a fragile counterpoint. You take a shuddering breath that tastes of iron, vinegar, and dust. The backward darkness awaits its mirrored shape on the skin of the sheep. You dip your quill into the potent, corrosive blackness. The vigil continues, not just against fatigue, but against the void itself, spilling in from the edges of the guttering light. One mirrored letter at a time, under the gaze of the hungry dark. Section 15. The drip, drip, drip from Anselm's desk becomes the heartbeat of the scriptorium, a slow, liquid metronome measuring the suffocating silence. You force your gaze away from the spreading stain, back to your own smudged Urbanet, darkness, backward. The quill feels like a lead weight in your hand, the ink clinging with viscous reluctance. You attempt the next backward letter, B, but your vision blurs. The candle flame on your left, already drowning in its own wax, splits into two dancing orbs. You blink hard, squeezing your gritty eyes shut for a second. When you open them, the flame is singular again, but the edges of your vision swim with motes of dancing darkness. Not just floaters, these shift, coalesce, retreat. A tendril of shadow near the water barrel seems to detach itself, slithering serpent-like along the base of the stone wall before dissolving into the greater gloom. Exhaustion is painting on the canvas of the night. Mainstream historical fact: extreme sleep deprivation, combined with prolonged visual strain in low, flickering light, reliably induces visual hallucinations. The brain, starved of rest and overwhelmed by sensory monotony, the scratch of quills, the oppressive silence, begins to misinterpret random patterns of light and shadow, constructing phantom shapes and movements, pareidolia on overdrive. What you see isn't supernatural, it's neurology screaming for respite. But knowing this offers cold comfort when the dancing motes resolve, for a heart-stopping instant, into a cluster of tiny, skittering spiders made of pure shadow scurrying across your manuscript page. You jerk your hand back, knocking the quill. It rolls harmlessly, but your heart hammers against your ribs. Just fatigue. Just the eyes. You repeat it like a prayer. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Monastic infirmarians often diagnose such visions as nocturnal vapors, bad humors rising from the stomach due to fasting or poor digestion, clouding the brain and conjuring fancies. Treatments range from foul-tasting digestive tonics, wormwood, centauri, to placing a cold, wet cloth on the forehead to condense the vapors. Brother Cedric swore blind that eating a single raw onion at Carmpline warded off shadow weavers, though the resulting breath was its own form of penance. You'd welcome an onion sting right now, just to feel something real. The phantom spiders are gone, replaced by a slow, swirling vortex in the corner of your vision, like ink dropped into water. It pulls your gaze relentlessly. You retrieve the quill, fingers trembling. Focus on the text. Urbanet. Backward E next. Simple curve. But the vortex in your peripheral vision pulses, threatening to suck your attention away. You fight it, anchoring your gaze to the vellum. The rough texture of the parchment seems to writhe beneath the word. Those aren't just natural follicle patterns. They look like tiny, contorted faces pressed against the skin from the other side, mouths open in silent screams. You dig a knuckle into your eye socket, the pressure a grounding pain. Stop it. It's sheepskin. Just sheepskin. When you look again, the faces are gone, but the parchment feels watchful. Historians still argue whether monks interpreted these fatigue-induced visions through a purely medical lens, humors, vapors, or if their deeply ingrained belief in the supernatural immediacy of spiritual warfare, angels and demons battling over every soul, every sacred word, inevitably framed them as literal demonic temptations or divine portents. Was a dancing shadow just a symptom of an empty stomach, or a minion of Satan testing your resolve? Brother Anselm, across the aisle, suddenly flinches. He stares, not at his fresh page, but into the empty air above his desk. His lips move soundlessly. Is he praying? Arguing? Seeing something you can't? The shared dread thickens, a tangible fog in the candlelit room. You try the backward E. Your hand moves, but the line curves too sharply, collapsing inward. A blot. Again. You press the heel of your hand against your forehead. The cold stone of the scriptorium feels less solid, the boundaries between the real and the imagined blurring like wet ink. The rhythmic scratching of quills around you transforms. It's no longer just writing. It's the sound of tiny claws scrabbling, of teeth gnawing on bone, of whispered secrets slithering from desk to desk. Scratch, scratch, scratch becomes hiss, hiss, hiss. You clamp your hands over your ears. The sound is inside your skull. It's the drip, drip, drip amplified, the sound of time itself leaking away, or something else dripping in the unseen corners. You lower your hands slowly. The scratching is just scratching again. Normal. Terrifyingly normal. Mainstream historical fact. Auditory hallucinations are also common under severe sleep deprivation and sensory isolation. The brain, desperate for input, fills the silence with phantom sounds, whispers, music, bells, or, in environments defined by specific noises like scratching quills, distorted versions of those very sounds. The gnawing you heard was your own exhausted mind warping the familiar. Brother Cuthbert whimpers softly. You glance over. He's staring fixedly at his page, but tears track clean lines through the ink smudges on his cheeks. He's seeing or hearing it too. The isolation of the silent scriptorium fractures. You're all adrift in the same leaking boat of fatigue, haunted by the same invisible specters conjured by your own depleted minds. You force yourself back to Urbanet. The blot on this stares like a dark, malevolent eye. You ignore it. Move on. Next. Backward. It's the same. Stability. You form it. The shape blessedly simple and unchanged. A tiny anchor. The swirling vortex in your peripheral vision shrinks, retreating. The phantom scratching settles back into its mundane rhythm. The brief wave of auditory terror ebbs, leaving you shivering, drenched in cold sweat despite the chill. The hallucination recedes, but the residue of fear remains, clinging like the smell of spilled ink. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some exhausted scribes reportedly found solace in tracing the contours of the Cairo symbol, hidden within their palm or on the desk edge, a tactile anchor against visual and auditory phantoms, a silent invocation of Christ's presence against the mind's unraveling. You curl your ink-stained fingers inward, tracing the lines of your own palm, seeking solidity in the simple map of skin and bone. The backward R in Urbanet proves treacherous. It requires a sharp upward hook. Your hand, weakened by adrenaline shakes, falters. The hook droops, merging with the next stroke. It looks like a shepherd's crook bent under an impossible weight. You leave it. Perfection died with Anselm's ink spill. You press on B-E-N-E-T. The letters form under your quill, crooked soldiers marching in reverse formation. Urbanet is complete, a testament to endurance over elegance. Darkness, mirrored. A wave of crushing mental fatigue follows the receding panic. The hallucinations may have been false, but the energy expended in resisting them, in grounding yourself back in the crumbling reality of the cold scriptorium, is devastatingly real. Your thoughts feel thick, slow, like wading through tar. Understanding the next backward word, lumen, light, becoming nemel, feels like deciphering a language spoken underwater. The cognitive gears grind to near halt. You are operating on fumes, the automation stripped away, leaving only a hollowed-out husk pushing a quill across skin. The shadows still press at the edge of your vision, but they are dormant now, waiting. The real darkness isn't out there. It's inside, filling the hollow spaces exhaustion has carved within your mind. The only light left is the guttering candle, and the fading, desperate hope that dawn holds more than just another shade of grey. The long night's true monsters are the phantoms your own exhaustion paints on the walls of your perception, and they are far harder to banish than any whispered demon. The vigil continues, a battle fought on the treacherous, shifting ground of a failing mind. Section 16. The crooked urbanet bleeds into the parchment like a bruise. Light, lumen, awaits its backward twin, nemel. The letters swim, not just from fatigue now, but from the sheer, grinding weight of repetition. Hours of forcing your hand leftward, of reversing every thought, have carved ruts in your mind deeper than the grooves on your desk. The initial terror of hallucinations has faded, not into calm, but into a numbed, monotonous dread. The shadows still writhe at the edge of your vision, the phantom whispers still rustle beneath the scratch of quills, but they've become part of the scriptorium's bleak furniture. You are beyond fear. You are submerged in the grey sludge of enduring. Dip quill. Reverse letter. Form shape. Dip quill. Reverse letter. Form shape. The sacred text has vanished. Only the mirrored mechanics remain. Mainstream historical fact. Monotony is a potent psychological stressor. Prolonged, repetitive tasks in sensory-deprived environments induce profound mental fatigue, decreased vigilance, and a dissociative state where time distorts and self-awareness diminishes. This highway hypnosis of the scriptorium wasn't conducive to piety. It was a mind-numbing trance necessary for survival. Your hand moves for the backward N in nemel. Downstroke. Upstroke left. Downstroke. The motion is rote, devoid of intention. The ink flows, the vellum accepts. You are machine processing symbols. Brother Anselm's rhythmic scratching across the aisle is the same metronomic beat it was hours ago. Brother Cuthbert's sniffles are the same. The drip, drip, drip from the ink spill is the same. Nothing changes. Nothing can change until the bell rings or the candle dies. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some monastic rules subtly acknowledge the soul-crushing effect of such labor. The Consuetudines of Cluny, for instance, reportedly allowed brief, silent stretching periods during exceptionally long copying sessions, not for comfort, but to recollect the scattered spirit and prevent errors born of withered attention. No such mercy here tonight. Your spirit feels permanently scattered. The E in nemel forms automatically, a lopsided oval. You don't even register its imperfection. Then, the spider returns. Not the fleeting shadow spiders of before. This one is startlingly real. Small, black, and glossy, it descends from the shadowed vault on a single, impossibly fine thread of silk, landing with delicate precision on the upper left corner of your manuscript. It pauses, seeming to survey the dense forest of black ink. Your breath catches. Is this real? The candlelight glints on its tiny carapace. It takes a hesitant step onto the word dais. A real creature. Tangible. Alive in this world of stone, vellum, and mirrored words. Its presence is an absurd intrusion, a spark of vibrant, chaotic life in the stagnant ritual. Historians still argue whether such mundane intrusions, insects, drifting feathers, sudden drafts, were welcomed as distractions from the monotony or cursed as further tests of concentration by a mischievous god. The spider moves, picking its way carefully over an abbreviation symbol. You watch it, mesmerized. Its tiny legs navigate the peaks and valleys of the ink strokes with astonishing agility. It's a world unto itself, utterly oblivious to your backward vigil, to the spilled ink, to the watching shadows. It explores a capital D as if it were a mountain range. A strange, almost painful feeling blooms in your chest. Not fear, but a profound sense of smallness. Your agony, the sacred text, the backward command, the weight of centuries. None of it matters to this tiny architect of silk. It's a humbling, jarring perspective shift. The numbness recedes slightly, replaced by a fragile awe. Mainstream historical fact: insects, particularly spiders and silverfish, were common pests in medieval scriptoria, attracted by the organic materials: parchment, leather bindings, glue, even the tallow candles. They posed a genuine threat, nibbling on pages or leaving corrosive droppings. Yet, they also feature in marginal art, sometimes depicted with surprising whimsy, suggesting a complex coexistence. This one seems benign, a silent explorer. It reaches the edge of the page, pauses, then rappels down onto the blank space beside your backward Nemel. It begins to move deliberately across your fresh vellum, heading towards the pool of candlelight warming the clay dish. Its path is a straight, dark line against the creamy surface. Right to left. Naturally. Effortlessly. The direction your own hand rebels against. A sound escapes you, a soft, involuntary huff that might be a laugh or a sob. Brother Anselm glances up, his eyes following your gaze. He sees the spider. His gaunt face registers surprise, then a flicker of something akin to wonder, or perhaps just shared recognition of this tiny, living counterpoint to their silent, mirrored suffering. He watches as the spider reaches the warm clay, pauses, seeming to bask for a moment in the candle's feeble heat, then turns and scuttles back the way it came, retracing its path with the same unhurried purpose. Left to right now. It crosses your backward Nemel without pause, climbs the manuscript page using the ink strokes as a ladder, and vanishes back into the shadows near the binding. Gone. The silence rushes back in, deeper than before. The monotony reasserts itself, the cold, the ache, the backward letters waiting. But something has shifted. The spider's brief, indifferent journey, its natural ease moving in both directions across the page, has left a mark deeper than ink. The rigid, agonizing unnaturalness of your task feels momentarily exposed. Why this? Why force the hand and mind against their grain? Was it truly piety, or pointless obscurity? The numbness is gone. In its place is a hollow ache of futility, sharper than hunger. The spider moved where it willed. You are chained to the mirror. You look down at Nemel. Them awaits. 3 jagged peaks. Your hand finds the quill. The automation is broken. Each stroke requires conscious, painful effort again. Downstroke. Up left. Downstroke. Upright. Downstroke. The letters form, crooked and heavy. The candle flame gutters lower. The spider's path, right to left, then left to right, remains etched on the vellum only in your mind, a silent reproach to the enforced, exhausting inversion. The monotony isn't just grinding. It's revealed as arbitrary. The vigil continues, but the fragile illusion of its necessity has been shattered by 8 delicate legs moving freely across the sacred skin. The backward night stretches on, heavier now with the weight of a question you dare not voice. Why? The only answer is the cold, the scratch of the quill, and the vast, indifferent darkness pressing against the window slit, holding dawn hostage. Section 17. The spider's silent departure leaves a void deeper than the surrounding shadows. The question it posed, why this inversion, hangs in the cold air, unanswered and corrosive. Your gaze drops back to the mangled enamel on the vellum. The backwardum sits like a broken crown, its peaks jagged and uneven. The brief spark of perspective, the glimpse of natural freedom, has extinguished the fragile automation that kept your hand moving. Now, every stroke is conscious agony again. The quill feels like a stranger's limb grafted onto your aching body. You dip it, the iron gall ink clinging with viscous reluctance. The next word, vitam, life. Backward, mative. The irony tastes like ash. Life feels reduced to this, cold, cramped, mirrored suffering. Mainstream historical fact. The sheer duration of the nocturnal vigil pushed human limits. Matins ended, but lords approached, then prime. Scriptoria often operated on a brutal cycle. Prayers, copying, prayers, copying, with only brief respites for meager sustenance. The body's circadian rhythm was violently inverted, a state modern chronobiology confirms induces profound physiological and psychological stress. Your internal clock screams for sleep, ignored for hours, leaving you adrift in a grey sea of perpetual, exhausted wakefulness. Brother Anselm shifts on his stool, a low groan escaping him. His clawed hand trembles visibly as he forms a simple forward letter. The spilled ink on his ruined page has dried into a permanent, black continent. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some exhausted scribes reportedly entered a state called the waking dream, a limbo between sleep and consciousness where familiar scriptorium sounds, scratching quills, rustling vellum, transformed into dreamlike narratives. Whispers became conversations, drips became footsteps, the wind's moan became distant plainsong. Historians still argue whether these experiences were seen as divine visions, demonic temptations, or simply the mind's desperate attempt to escape monotony through hallucinatory storytelling. Your own perception wavers. The rhythmic scratch-scratch from Brother Cuthbert's desk morphs into the sound of tiny claws tapping out a frantic message on stone. Tap tap tap. Pause. Tap tap. You shake your head, blinking gritty eyes. Just quills. Always just quills. You attempt the backward M4 mative. Your hand rebels. The first downstroke is weak, wavering. The upward left stroke catches on a rough patch of parchment, tearing a tiny white scar. The ink bleeds into the tear. A miniature ruin. Despair, colder and heavier than the stone floor, settles in your gut. The spider moved with purpose. You are etching failure onto skin. Across the aisle, Anselm pauses, staring not at his page, but at his own ink-stained, trembling fingers. His lips move silently. Is he praying, cursing, or simply rehearsing the shapes of letters that no longer come easily? His gaze lifts, meets yours for a fleeting instant. In his eyes, you see a reflection of your own hollow exhaustion, the shared burden of broken bodies and mirrored words. It's a wordless communion deeper than any spoken psalm. The candle on your left sputters violently, its flame shrinking to a desperate blue bead at the tip of the wick. The wax pool has solidified into a grotesque, frozen cascade down the clay dish. Darkness encroaches rapidly, swallowing the edges of your desk, climbing the manuscript page. Panic, dulled by fatigue but still potent, flutters in your chest. You can barely see the forward text, let alone reverse it. You lean in, your nose almost touching the cold vellum, squinting. The letters swim in the gloom. Mative becomes a tangled thicket of indecipherable shapes. Mainstream historical fact. Tallow candles burned unevenly and required constant maintenance, snuffing the wick to remove carbon buildup, thieves that dimmed the flame, and repositioning the wick to access unmelted tallow. Neglect meant guttering, smoke, and premature darkness. Yours is dying. Brother Librarian materializes like a vengeful spirit beside your desk. He doesn't speak. He observes the dying candle, the desperate hunch of your posture, the ruindom on your page. His expression is unreadable in the failing light, but disapproval radiates from him like cold. He produces a fresh candle stub from within his robe, not a gift, but a grim necessity. With practiced efficiency, he drips hot wax from the dying flame onto your desk, plants the new candle firmly in the molten pool, and lights it from the old wick. The old flame surrenders with a final, smoky sigh. The new one flares, bright and harsh, momentarily blinding. The sudden light is a physical shock. It reveals the full extent of the night's toll. The ink smudges on your hands and face, the deep shadows under Anselm's eyes, the network of cracks on the desktop, the sheer, pervasive grime embedded in the stone floor. It also illuminates a single, glistening strand, the spider's silk, still dangling from the vault above, catching the new flame's light like a silver thread. A fragile connection to the brief, indifferent freedom you witnessed. Brother Librarian follows your gaze upward. Does he see it? His eyes narrow slightly, then return to you. He gives the faintest, almost imperceptible nod, not of approval, but of instruction. Continue. He melts back into the gloom near the door, leaving you bathed in the harsh, revealing light of the new candle. The respite is brief. The light is clearer, yes, but it also exposes every flaw in your backward script. Every tremor, every blot, every crooked line stands in stark, humiliating relief. Mative looks like the scrawl of a fevered child. The numbness is gone, replaced by a sharp, stinging shame. The spider's thread sways gently in a draft you can't feel. Mative. Life. Backward. You dip the quill into the potent black ink. The new candlelight glints on its dark surface. The thread glimmers silver. You take a breath that rasps in your dry throat. The mirrored word demands completion. The vigil grinds on, illuminated now by a harsh, unforgiving light that reveals only the depth of the struggle and the fragile, mocking memory of freedom dangling just out of reach. The backward night offers no answers, only the next letter, the next stroke, the next breath held against the suffocating weight of stone, silence, and inverted time. Section 18. The harsh new candlelight doesn't illuminate, it accuses. Every shaky line of mative, life, backward, stands exposed. The torn parchment, the bleeding ink, the jagged peaks of them collapsing under their own weight. The silver spider's thread still glimmers overhead, a cruel reminder of effortless movement while your hand feels shackled to this mirrored labor. Shame burns hotter than the fresh flame. You dip the quill, the iron gall ink like tar in the pit of your stomach. The next letter, A, should be simple. A backward curve. But your fingers cramp anew, the tremor betraying you. The line wobbles, veers left, and terminates in another microscopic blot. Failure. The word mocks you. Life reduced to this, a procession of errors under pitiless light. Fatigue isn't just physical now, it's a toxin seeping into your mind. The rigid lines of the manuscript's text begin to breathe. The crisp Carolingian minuscule softens, the black strokes swelling and receding like tide marks on a dark shore. Mainstream historical fact. Prolonged sleep deprivation disrupts visual processing. The brain's occipital lobe, overwhelmed and starved of restorative rest, misinterprets stable patterns, causing pareidolia, seeing faces in clouds, and more complex illusions like motion in static objects. Your exhausted neurons are fabricating movement where none exists. The capital D in Deus bulges, its curve pulsing rhythmically. The abbreviation symbol and et beside it shimmers, its loops unraveling like smoke rings. You blink hard, knuckling your gritty eyes. Still there. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Medieval infirmarians called these visions waking dreams or moon sickness, blaming nocturnal humors or the malign influence of certain constellations. Treatments ranged from sniffing vinegar-soaked sponges to scour the senses, to wearing amulets of moonstone, believed to absorb chaotic lunar energies that stirred the phlegm in the brain. Brother Anselm's clawed hand drifts into your peripheral vision. It's not just trembling. The shadows cast by his gnarled fingers elongate, stretching across his desk like skeletal talons grasping at his fresh vellum. You jerk your head away. Just the light. Just fatigue. You force focus back to mative. The T awaits, a backward crossbeam. Downstroke, then left. Simple. But the parchment itself seems to ripple. The follicle patterns beneath the ink writhe, coiling and uncoiling like pale worms trapped beneath the skin. Historians still argue whether monks experiencing these phenomena interpreted them through theology, demonic temptation or divine vision, or rudimentary medicine. Did they see the dancing letters as Satan's mockery of sacred text, or merely as vapors rising from a cold, empty stomach? The distinction blurs when the T you attempt doesn't just waver, it crawls. The ink line squirms on the page, a living thing refusing its assigned shape. A choked sound escapes you. Brother Cuthbert whimpers nearby, a soft, despairing echo. The scriptorium's silence curdles. The familiar scratch-scratch of quills distorts. It's no longer the sound of writing. It's the skittering of insect legs, countless tiny feet scrabbling across stone. Scritch, scratch, scritch. Behind you. Beneath your stool. Inside the walls. You clamp your hands over your ears. The sound intensifies, vibrating through your skull, the gnawing of time, the chewing of darkness on the edges of the light. You lower your hands slowly, trembling. The scratching is just scratching again. Brother Anselm's quill moves steadily. It's inside your head. The realization is more terrifying than spiders. Your own mind has become the haunted scriptorium. A wave of vertigo hits. The vaulted ceiling plunges downward, then recedes to an impossible height. The rows of desks warp, leaning inward like crooked teeth in a giant maw. The stern saint statue by the door tilts its stone head, its carved eyes swiveling to pin you with a lifeless gaze. Just the candle flicker. Just exhaustion. You grip the edge of your desk, knuckles white, anchoring yourself to the solid wood. The grain beneath your fingertips feels alive, writhing like the parchment. You squeeze your eyes shut. Darkness. Blessed, solid darkness. But even here, phantoms bloom. After images of the backward text, Mative, Nemel, Urbanet, flaring like embers against your eyelids, spinning in dizzying, nonsensical orbits. Mainstream historical fact. Auditory and visual hallucinations are well-documented consequences of extreme sleep deprivation and sensory monotony. The brain, deprived of external variety and restorative REM sleep, generates its own stimulus, often distorted versions of ambient sounds, like quills, or intrusive, vivid imagery. Monks, isolated in silence and dim light for hours, were prime candidates for such neurological mutiny. Opening your eyes is a fresh assault. The new candle flame splits into 3 dancing orbs, each casting competing, overlapping shadows that twist across your page. The backwarder you need to form for Mative is swallowed by the chaos. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some scribes, driven to the edge, reportedly whispered forbidden prayers to Saint Dymphna, patroness of the mentally afflicted, or traced the shape of the Tau cross, toe, on their foreheads with ink-stained thumbs, a desperate warding against the madness of the long night watch. Your thumb finds your forehead, the gritty ink a tangible anchor. Tau. Stability. Protection. You trace the shape, a silent plea. The triple flames merge back into one, steadier now. The skittering fades to a dull buzz. The saint statue stares straight ahead. A fragile calm descends, bought with a moment of silent, internal heresy. You seize the quill. There emerges, crooked, but intact. Then T. I. V. Mative is complete, a crooked scar on the vellum. Life. Mirrored. A hollow victory. The hallucinations haven't vanished. They've retreated to the periphery, waiting. The shadows behind Brother Anselm deepen, swirling like ink dropped in water. The cold bites sharper. The new candle, burning bright and clear, feels like a spotlight on a stage where you are performing an absurd, endless pantomime for an audience of phantoms. The spider's thread glimmers once more, a silver thread tethering you to a reality that feels increasingly thin. The backward night's true horror isn't the cold or the labor. It's the unraveling of your own mind, stitch by precious stitch, under the relentless, guttering candlelight. The vigil continues, a battle fought on a landscape where stone, parchment, and sanity itself are beginning to melt. Section 19. The crooked Mative bleeds into the parchment, a testament to endurance over grace. The next word looms, silentium, silence. Backward, muitnalis. It feels like a cosmic joke. Silence isn't just the absence of sound here. It's a suffocating entity, thick as wool, pressing against your eardrums, amplifying the frantic drumbeat of your own pulse. You dip the quill. The iron gall ink beads darkly. The harsh new candlelight, while banishing the deepest shadows, casts everything in stark, unforgiving relief. Every tremor of your hand, Every microscopic flaw in the vellum, every dried ink stain on the desk becomes a glaring indictment. You begin the backward M. Downstroke. Up left. Downstroke. Upright. Downstroke. The motions are mechanical, driven by muscle memory scraped raw from repetition. But halfway through the second downstroke, something shifts. Not in your hand. In time. One moment, you're forming the jagged peak. The next, the candle flame is noticeably shorter, a fresh dribble of wax hardening on the clay dish. The M is finished, but you have no conscious memory of completing it. A chunk of existence, minutes, seconds, has vanished. A cold void opens in your chest. Mainstream historical fact: microsleeps, brief, involuntary lapses into sleep lasting mere seconds, are a common, dangerous symptom of severe sleep deprivation. The brain, unable to sustain wakefulness, shuts down essential functions momentarily, creating terrifying gaps in awareness. You stare at the completed M. It looks alien, like someone else's hand intervened while you were elsewhere. Panic, cold and slick, coats your throat. What else did you miss? Did you make a sound? Move. Did Brother Librarian notice? Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some monastic chronicles mention the lost minutes, attributing these temporal lapses to the thief of vigil, a minor demon believed to steal fragments of time from weary monks, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable to greater temptations. Others blamed congestion of the animal spirits in the brain's ventricles. You flex your cramped fingers, trying to anchor yourself in the present. The cold stone beneath your sandals. The gritty sting in your eyes. The acrid tang of ink. Real. But the lost time gapes like a wound. You force your gaze to the manuscript. The next letter for muitnalis is U. Backward, it's a simple curve. You dip the quill. As you touch nib to vellum, the Carolingian minuscule letters on the original page shimmer. Not the breathing motion from before. This is different. The ink itself seems to liquefy, the letters subtly rearranging themselves. S becomes a long-forgotten archaic form. I elongates into a dagger-like. The familiar, clear script warps into something older, stranger, more sinister. Historians still argue whether such perceptual distortions were purely neurological or fueled by exposure to genuinely archaic scripts sometimes recopied by later monks, causing momentary cognitive dissonance when unfamiliar letter forms surfaced amidst familiar text. Is this a trick of your failing eyes? Or has the manuscript itself slipped backward through time? You blink rapidly. The letters snap back to their proper Carolingian forms. But the disorientation lingers, a sour taste in your mouth. Was it real? A waking dream within the lost minutes? The backward U form is shaky, its curve collapsing inward. You press on I, T, N. The strokes are hesitant, haunted by the phantom script. The word muitnalis takes shape, a crooked monument to disorientation. Silence, mirrored and fractured. A wave of profound dissociation washes over you. The scriptorium feels unreal, a stage set painted on the void. Brother Anselm across the aisle isn't a fellow sufferer. He's a waxwork figure, frozen mid-stroke. Brother Cuthbert's sniffle sounds canned, artificial. Even the cold feels like a theatrical effect. You feel like an actor playing a role, the weary scribe. The quill in your hand isn't a tool, it's a prop. The vellum isn't skin, it's painted canvas. This isn't your life, it's a performance observed by unseen eyes from the impenetrable darkness beyond the candlelight. The concept of dawn, of ever leaving this stage, feels like a fictional promise in a poorly written play. Mainstream historical fact: depersonalization and derealization, feelings of detachment from oneself or the external world, are common under extreme stress, fatigue, and sensory deprivation. The mind, overwhelmed, constructs psychological distance as a defense mechanism. You are floating outside yourself, watching a stranger's hand trace mirrored letters onto fake skin. The harsh candlelight glints off the silver spider's thread, still dangling from the vault. It seems brighter now, the only thing possessing tangible reality in this dissolving world. It connects the shadowed ceiling to nothing. A thread to nowhere. A perfect symbol. You focus on it, clinging to its fragile tangibility. Real. The thread is real. Brother Anselm shifts. The movement, sudden in the static scene, jolts you back. He rubs his temples, his face etched with a pain that looks startlingly genuine. His real. The cold biting your feet is real. The ache in your spine is agonizingly real. The dissociation recedes like a tide, leaving you stranded on the familiar, painful shore of the scriptorium. The stage set hardens back into stone, vellum, and ink. The performance is your life. There is no audience but the shadows and the silent saints. The backwardly in muitnalis comes next. A simple curve. But your hand, weakened by the psychological onslaught, trembles violently. The line wavers, thickens, bleeds into the preceding N. A blotch. Another ruin. A sound escapes you, a dry, rattling sigh that seems to echo in the suffocating silence. Brother Librarian's gaze, sharp as a quill knife, snaps toward you from the doorway. He doesn't move, but his attention is a physical weight. Judgment hangs suspended. You stare at the blotch. Silence. Muitnalis. It looks like a stain of pure void, absorbing the candlelight. The lost minutes yawn behind you. The phantom script flickers at the edge of memory. The dissociation threatens to return, a seductive escape from the crushing weight of failure and fatigue. The silver thread glimmers, a lifeline to nothingness. You fumble for the bread eraser, long gone. You have only your sleeve. You press the coarse wool onto the wet ink. It smears, dragging the darkness into a wider, grey smear, embedding fibers into the mess. The silence isn't just around you. It's seeping into the page, into your actions, into the hollow spaces the lost minutes carved within you. The vigil isn't just against the night or the task. It's against the unraveling of your own sense of reality, stitch by precious stitch, under the harsh, revealing gaze of the guttering candle. The backward word remains unfinished, a mirror reflecting only chaos. The silentium is winning. Section 20. The ink smear where muitnalis should be stares back, a Rorschach blot of failure absorbing the harsh candlelight. Silence isn't mirrored. It's embodied in that grey-black void on the vellum. You lower your ink-stained sleeve. The course will now part of the ruin. The act feels futile, like trying to erase the night itself. Fatigue isn't a wave anymore. It's the ocean you're drowning in, and its depths are breeding phantoms. At the edge of the guttering candlelight, the shadows begin to dance. Not the vague, shifting shapes of before, but distinct, impossible forms. A cluster of tiny, hooded figures, no taller than your thumb, materializes near the base of your ink pot. They move with jerky, marionette-like steps, their faces featureless smudges of darkness. One raises a minuscule, impossibly thin rod, pointing it toward your trembling hand. You freeze, breath caught. Mainstream historical fact. Prolonged sleep deprivation and sensory monotony reliably induce complex visual hallucinations. The brain's overworked visual cortex, deprived of meaningful input, activates stored patterns, faces, figures, familiar shapes, projecting them onto random light and shadow. Your hooded scribes are neurology screaming for rest, not demons. Yet knowing this doesn't stop your heart from hammering against your ribs. The figures don't vanish. They process in a slow, silent circle around the ink pot. Another group materializes near Brother Anselm's spilled ink continent, a solemn conclave surveying the damage. One bends, as if inspecting the stained shoreline. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some monastic texts suggested such visions were lares or penates, spirits of the scriptorium itself, guardians of tools and texts who manifested to chastise careless scribes or mourn ruined work. Appeasing them required a whispered apology and a drop of ink spilled deliberately onto waste parchment as an offering. You watch, transfixed, as the tiny figure near Anselm's stain straightens, turning its blank face toward you. A drop of ink. An offering. Your numb fingers fumble for your own ink pot. Before you can act, the air above your manuscript ripples. The letters of the backward word you abandoned, muitnalis, detach from the page. The M-U-I rise like black smoke, swirling in the candle-heated air above the vellum. They twist, merge, and reform not into Latin, but into angular, jagged runes you've never seen yet somehow recognize. a language of exhaustion and despair. They pulse with a dark, internal light. Historians still argue whether these vivid, thematic hallucinations, scribes seeing scribal figures, letters coming alive, were interpreted as divine messages, demonic taunts, or merely understood as phantasms of a withered mind by medieval monks themselves. Did Brother Anselm, seeing his own spilled ink inspected by shadows, feel judged by God, by the scriptorium spirit, or just by his own unraveling sanity? The runes pulse again, throbbing in time with your headache. A low hum fills your ears, not the skittering of before, but a deep, resonant drone like a distant monastery bell submerged in tar. The hooded figures pause their processions, their featureless faces turning toward the swirling runes. Brother Cuthbert whimpers, a high, thin sound swallowed by the drone. You tear your gaze from the swirling darkness, looking desperately toward the high window slit. Still black. No hint of dawn. Only the void pressing in, feeding the phantoms. Then, the candle flame sings. Not a sound, but a visible vibration. The yellow light fractures into prismatic shards, emerald, sapphire, crimson, that lance across the desk, painting the writhing runes in impossible colors. The hooded figures scatter like startled crows, dissolving into the greater gloom. The runes themselves shudder, their dark light dimming as the colored shards pierce them. Mainstream historical fact: prisoner's cinema is a phenomenon where prolonged exposure to low light or darkness causes the visual cortex to generate spontaneous bursts of pattern and color. Geometric shapes, swirling lights, vivid hues, without external stimulus. Your starving brain is conjuring a light show from the void, a final, desperate bid for stimulation. The beauty of it is horrifying. A sapphire shard stabs into the grey smear that was muitnaless. Where it touches, the ink doesn't lighten. It deepens into a bottomless well of indigo. Tiny points of light ignite within it. Cold, blue-white stars in a miniature cosmos. You lean closer, mesmerized despite the terror. The stars swirl, forming a familiar constellation, Ursa Minor, the little bear, right there on your ruined vellum. The hum in your ears deepens, harmonizing with the silent song of the candle's fractured light. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Medieval star charts sometimes depicted constellations as celestial beasts or figures, and exhausted scribes copying astronomical texts might dream of them. But to see one ignite in spilled ink? Some marginal prayers invoke Saint Jerome, patron of librarians, to calm the wandering stars within the vellum when fatigue made the heavens feel too close. You whisper his name, a dry rasp lost in the drone, Hieronymus. The indigo cosmos swirls faster. The stars streak, becoming comets of cold fire tracing paths across the ink-stained void. One comet veers toward the edge of the blot, aiming for the fresh vellum beyond, a celestial invasion. You jerk your hand back, shielding the blank space instinctively. The comet hits your ink-stained knuckle. No pain, no light, only the gritty feel of dried ink. You blink. The colors vanish. The hum ceases. The runes are gone. The hooded figures are absent. Your manuscript page lies as it was, the grey smear of ruined muitnalis, the crooked remnants of mative and urbanet above it. The candle burns steadily, its light once again harsh and yellow and ordinary. The only movement is the frantic pulse visible in your own ink-stained wrist. Brother Anselm rubs his eyes, his shoulders slumped. Brother Cuthbert whimpers again, a broken sound. The silence rushes back, heavier than before, thick with the residue of shared, unspoken visions. The dance at the edge of the light wasn't just shapes, it was the fabric of perception fraying. The hallucinations weren't escapes, they were deeper prisons within the stone-walled one. You pick up your quill. It feels heavier than ever. The next backward word awaits, but the vellum no longer feels like skin or canvas. It feels like the event horizon of a collapsing star, waiting to swallow the next mirrored letter, the next shred of your unraveling mind. The vigil continues, not in silence, but in the deafening echo of a light show only the damned could see. Dawn isn't just light, it's the only exorcism left. Section 21. The phantom constellations fade, leaving only the grey smear and the harsh, accusing candlelight. The silence isn't empty. It's a pressure chamber holding the residue of your unraveling mind. You pick up the quill. It feels alien, a bone shard carved from some unknown beast. The next word, ascend it, he ascends. Backward, tid nexa. The irony cuts deeper than the cold. Ascension feels impossible when your spirit scrapes the scriptorium's flagstones. Your hand moves, downstroke for the backward T. The ink flows thick and slow, like congealing blood. But as the line forms, the rigid boundaries of now begin to dissolve. The scratch of the quill isn't just on vellum. It's the sound of your father's knife whittling a ladder rung in a sun-drenched yard a lifetime ago. The scent of fresh-cut pine sap overlays the metallic ink tang. You're 8 years old, barefoot on warm earth, watching wood curls fall. Climb steady, boy, your father grunts, his voice rough as oak bark. Mind the gaps. One rung at a time. Mainstream historical fact. Childhood memories, often vivid and sensory, frequently surface during extreme fatigue and dissociation. The brain, starved of external novelty and desperate for neural activity, dredges deep stores of personal history, blurring past and present. The warmth of that remembered sun is a physical shock against your perpetually chilled skin. The cold stone beneath your sandals now feels like a betrayal. The backward eye begins. Upstroke. But the motion triggers another fissure. You're not in the scriptorium. You're clinging to that rough pine ladder propped against the hayloft, 10 summers old. The rung beneath your foot groans, splintering. You plunge downward, a sickening lurch, only to jerk back onto the unforgiving stool, your spine screaming. The vellum swims. The backward eye is a jagged scar. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some exhausted monks reportedly experience falling dreams while awake, a sudden, visceral sense of plummeting triggered by microsleeps or neural misfires, often interpreted as the soul being tested by demons during vulnerable moments. Your father's voice echoes in the cold air, mind the gaps. The gap between then and now feels like a chasm you're falling through endlessly. The D in tid nexa requires a curve. Your hand trembles. The curve becomes a wobble, bleeding into the next stroke. The ink blot spreads like spilled ale on a tavern floor, another memory. You're 15, flustered, serving Brother Martin, years before the palsy ruined his hands, in the Abbey refectory. The heavy pitcher slips. Brown ale floods the scrubbed trestle, dripping onto his sandals. His face, then stern but not unkind, morphs into Brother Librarian's glacial disapproval now. Clumsy lad, Martin's remembered voice chides, merging with the librarian's silent condemnation. The shame is identical, a hot brand across decades. Historians still argue whether such vivid, intrusive memories were seen as divine reminders of past failings, prompting penance, demonic distractions from sacred work, or simply the mind's chaotic firing under duress. Was the spilled ale a lesson from God, or just a misfiring neuron dragging up adolescent humiliation to torment you at your weakest? The backward informs without conscious thought, a crooked afterthought beside the ale-ink blot. Ascension feels like a sick joke played on a creature born to crawl. The candle flame gutters. The light dims, thickening the shadows. Within the gloom near the water barrel, the figure isn't a hooded phantom or scriptorium spirit. It's Brother Martin, younger, as he was before the quill broke his hand. He stands silently, holding a wooden practice tablet smeared with faded, childish letters, your first, clumsy attempts at the alphabet under his patient tutelage. He points to a shakier. Begin again, his ghost murmur weaves through the scratch of real quills. Foundation matters. Mainstream historical fact. Memory recall under stress is often dominated by emotionally charged events, moments of shame, triumph, or profound learning. Martin's patient guidance was a cornerstone of your monastic life. His apparition embodies the crushing weight of expectation you feel you're failing. You try to focus on the backward E, but Martin's ghostly finger traces the childisher on his tablet. Begin again. How? When the foundation feels like shifting sand. The ghost fades, replaced by the gaunt reality of Brother Anselm opposite, his clawed hand tracing a forward with agonizing slowness. His eyes meet yours. No judgment. Only a hollowed-out empathy that speaks volumes. I am falling too. We all are. The shared descent is the only true communion left. The backward C forms under your quill, a clumsy hook catching nothing. Ascension. This is the opposite. This is the long slide into the cellar of the self, where childhood ladders break and spilled ale stains eternity. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some monastic rules warned against dwelling on phantasms of the past, prescribing the recitation of the Miserere, Psalm 51, to refocus the soul on divine mercy and the present moment. You whisper the opening line, the Latin ash on your tongue, Miserere mei, Deus. Have mercy on me, O God. Mercy feels as distant as the sun-warmed pine of your childhood. You press on S. Tidnexa is complete, a crooked tombstone on the page. He ascends. The words mock the weight pinning you to the stool, to the cold, to the relentless slide into memory and madness. The candle flame dips again, plunging your desk into deeper shadow. Outside the high window slit, the absolute blackness seems to ripple, a subtle lightening, not grey, but the faintest dilution of ink black to charcoal. Is it dawn, or another trick of the light-starved mind? Hope, fragile and terrifying, flickers like the dying candle. The vigil grinds on, a descent measured in remembered falls, spilled liquids, and the phantom faces of teachers watching from the shadows of a past that refuses to stay buried. The only ascent is the slow, excruciating climb out of the abyss of the self, one mirrored, broken letter at a time, toward a dawn that might just be another illusion. Section 22. The charcoal grey lightening beyond the high window slit is no illusion. Dawn is bleeding into the night, a slow, silent stain spreading across the void. It should feel like salvation. It doesn't. It feels like an indictment. The feeble glow, seeping through the narrow aperture, doesn't warm, it exposes. It reveals the full, brutal cost of the backward night etched onto every surface, every face. The harsh candlelight, once your sole adversary, now battles the invading grey, casting long, skeletal shadows that stretch and warp like the final, desperate contortions of the dying. Your own shadow looms large and distorted on the stone wall behind you, a hunched, monstrous parody of a scribe. You try to straighten, to defy the curve your spine has been forced into for hours. Agony lances through your lower back, locking the muscles in a vice of protest. A choked gasp escapes you. Ascension is a myth. You are rooted to this stool, this pain, this mirrored purgatory. Mainstream historical fact, the monastic schedule offered little true respite. Lauds, morning prayer, followed matins, often beginning before full sunrise. Scriptorium work might pause for communal prayer and a sparse breakfast, bread, weak beer, perhaps cheese, but frequently resumed immediately afterward, extending the grueling cycle of labor long into daylight hours. Dawn wasn't freedom, it was a shift change in the prison of duty. The grey light reveals Brother Anselm's face in stark relief. Deep grooves bracket his mouth, carved by exhaustion and pain. His clawed hand, resting beside his fresh vellum, tremors violently even at rest. The spilled ink continent on his previous page has dried into a permanent, black scar. He doesn't look towards the light. He stares at his trembling fingers with an expression of profound, weary betrayal. His body, like yours, is a map of the night's ravages. Quirky or fringe tidbit, some scribes believed the first grey light of dawn held a unique peril, the thief of completion. It was said unfinished work touched by this ambiguous light was cursed, prone to error, attracting moths, or even causing the ink itself to fade prematurely. Finishing a line or word before the true sun breached the horizon was crucial to ward off this spectral pilferer. You glance frantically at your own page. Tidnexa, he ascends, backward, is finished, but the grey smear of muitnalis, silence, gapes like an open wound below it, untouched by redemptive ink. The grey light inches across the desk towards it. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through the fatigue. You grab your quill, fumbling it in your numb, ink-crusted fingers. It clatters onto the vellum. The sound is loud, final. Brother Cuthbert flinches. Brother Anselm slowly lifts his gaze from his ruined hand, his eyes meeting yours. In them, you see no judgment, only a hollow reflection of your own frantic despair. The grey light touches the edge of the smear. Too late. The thief has touched it. A wave of superstitious dread washes over you, irrational yet potent. Will the mirrored words you write now be doomed to fade? Will your entire night's labor unravel like rotten thread? Historians still argue whether such pervasive folklore served a practical purpose, motivating scribes to finish tasks before inevitable interruption, or reflected a genuine existential fear that their immense, anonymous toil could be rendered void by forces beyond their control, time, decay, or capricious spirits. The light strengthens, minute by agonizing minute. It leaches the warmth from the candle flame, turning its glow sickly yellow against the encroaching grey. It illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air, not phantom stars or hooded figures now, but mundane particles swirling in the cold currents. Their ordinary nature feels almost obscene after the night's phantasmagoria. The starkness reveals the true squalor, the congealed wax waterfalls, the ink stains ground into the wood, the rushes on the floor matted with dirt and spilled materials. This isn't a sacred workshop. It's the aftermath of a silent battle fought with quills and endurance. Mainstream historical fact: chronic sleep deprivation manifests physically. Blurred vision, microtremors, impaired fine motor control, heightened pain sensitivity, and significantly reduced cognitive function. Your attempt to recut your quill tip is a disaster. Your hand shakes too violently. The knife nicks the shaft, splitting the feather. Ruined. You stare at the damaged tool, a symbol of your own frayed state. The grey light now fully illuminates the smear of muitnalis. The thief has claimed it. Defeat settles heavy in your chest. You drop the ruined quill. Across the aisle, Brother Anselm does the unthinkable. He closes his manuscript. Gently, reverently, but firmly. He places his quill down beside it. He doesn't look at the approaching dawn, nor at Brother Librarian. He simply folds his clawed hands in his lap, a gesture of utter surrender. His work, whatever he managed after the spill, is finished or abandoned. He stares straight ahead, his face a mask of exhausted resignation. The grey light washes over him, emphasizing the hollows under his eyes, the parchment-like texture of his skin. He looks ancient, eroded. The sight is a catalyst. Around the scriptorium, other monks begin to subtly disengage. Quills slow, then still. Manuscripts are closed with soft thuds. The relentless, rhythmic scratch that defined the night fades, replaced by a new, oppressive silence. Not the focused hush of labor, but the weary quiet of survivors assessing the damage. The grey light, growing stronger, becomes the dominant illumination, cold and unforgiving. It shows the toll on every face. Brother Cuthbert's tear-streaked cheeks, another novice rubbing sightless eyes, the grim set of a senior scribe's jaw as he surveys a page riddled with corrections. Brother Librarian moves. Not towards anyone, but to the high window slit. He peers out, his gaunt profile silhouetted against the lightening grey. He stands utterly still for a long moment. Then, without turning, he raises one hand, a silent command. The signal is clear. Cease. The vigil is over. The backward night has ended, not with triumph, but with exhaustion and the cold, grey light of a dawn that promises no rest, only the next obligation. Lauds will ring soon. The chapel awaits. The cold stone floor. The chanting. The gnawing hunger. You look down at your own battlefield. The crooked backward words, the grey smear of silence cursed by dawn, the ruined quill. No sense of accomplishment, only a profound, bone-deep weariness and the sour taste of incompletion. The spider's thread, high above, catches the grey light, a silver filament now leading nowhere. The body's rebellion is complete, aching, trembling, hollow. The mind is a scarred landscape. The mirrored words lie frozen on the skin of the sheep, awaiting the binder's needle and the library's dust. Ascension was never the goal. Survival was. And dawn, cold and grey and demanding, is simply the herald of the next survival. The bell for Lauds will toll soon, a call not to prayer, but to endure. Section 23. The grey dawn light bleeds through the high window slit, cold and thin as watered milk. Brother Librarian's raised hand hangs in the air, a frozen command. Cease. The scratch of quills has stopped, but the silence that follows isn't peace. It's the hollow aftermath of a siege. You sit frozen on your stool, the ruined quill lying across the grey smear of muitnalis. Your body is a landscape of ruin, back locked in its permanent curve, hand a throbbing claw, eyes burning coals in their sockets. The cold, no longer battled by the focus of labor, seeps deeper, finding new crevices in your fatigue-numbed flesh. It's the cold of a tomb just opened. Mainstream historical fact: this suspended hour between night work and lords was a perilous limbo. Benedict's rule demanded vigilance. Surgendum est ante lucem, et ad opus Dei, cum tremor festina. Rise before the light, and hasten to the work of God with trembling. Yet the body, pushed beyond its limits, often hovered on the precipice of collapse. The mind, starved of sleep and strained by hours of unnatural focus, became fertile ground for waking nightmares. Movement feels impossible. You stare at the guttering candle on your left. Its flame, once a beacon, is a dying ember struggling against the indifferent grey dawn. The wax has overflowed completely, a frozen, yellowish cascade engulfing the clay dish. The light it casts is feeble, jaundiced, shrinking your world to the immediate circle of your desk, a tiny, flickering island in a vast, cold sea of stone and silence. Quirky or fringe tidbit: some cloisters whispered of the grey watchers, spirits drawn to the exhausted stillness of this pre-Lord's hour. Neither angel nor demon, they were thought to be the echoes of monks who had died at their desks, unable or unwilling to relinquish their vigil. They manifested not as shapes, but as sudden chills down the spine, the faint scent of extinguished candle smoke, or the unsettling feeling of being studied from just beyond the candle's reach. You shiver violently, though no draught stirs the heavy air. Is it the cold? Or something else, leaning in? Monotony, no longer broken by the rhythm of backward strokes, becomes its own torture. The same cold flagstones beneath your sandals. The same ache grinding in your spine. The same metallic tang of ink drying on your skin. The same faint, rhythmic drip, drip, drip from Brother Anselm's ruined page, the only sound in the profound hush. It becomes a maddening metronome, counting down seconds that feel like eternities. Your gaze fixates on the dancing candle flame. It gutters, shudders, and for a heart-stopping moment, the tiny, leaping shadow it casts on the manuscript's edge detaches. It skitters sideways across the vellum, a black beetle made of pure shadow, vanishing into the deeper gloom beneath the ink pot. You blink. Gone. Just the flame's normal dance. Historians still argue whether this pervasive sense of being watched, these fleeting phantom movements at the edge of vision, were interpreted as spiritual phenomena, the grey watchers, lingering demons of the night, or simply understood by the monks themselves as the predictable hallucinations born of shattered nerves and sleep-starved brains. Did they pray against them, or merely endure them as another facet of the grind? The grey light strengthens minutely, leaching colour from the world. The vibrant crimson of a rubricated initial on Anselm's manuscript dulls to dried blood. The rich black of your own iron gall ink looks flat, ashen. The faces of the other monks, revealed in the creeping dawn, are studies in dissolution. Brother Cuthbert's youthful features slack and grey, another novice with his head bowed, forehead pressed against cold oak, Brother Anselm's eyes closed, his breathing shallow and ragged. They are not comrades, they are fellow spectres waiting for the bell to toll their next sentence. The shared suffering of the night has curdled into isolated exhaustion. Mainstream historical fact: the transition from artificial light, candle tallow, to dawn's natural grey was notoriously harsh on eyes already strained by hours of close work. Pupils dilated for dim candlelight were suddenly assaulted by diffused daylight, causing pain, blurred vision, and exacerbating existing visual disturbances like floaters or after images. Your own eyes protest as the grey light intensifies. The edges of objects blur. The grey smear on your page seems to pulse faintly. Tiny, shimmering after images of the backward letters you'd copied, tid nexa, mative, dance like ghostly imprints across your vision when you close your eyes, then linger when you open them, superimposed on the weary faces opposite. Ascendit. Life. Mocking phantoms. Then, the whispers begin. Not the imagined skittering or phantom chants of the deep night. These are softer, more insidious. Faint sibilants, like dry leaves scraping stone, seeming to come from the deep shadows near the water barrel. Eskin. A pause. Sacred Eskin. Your breath catches. Brother Cuthbert lifts his head slightly, his eyes wide, darting towards the sound. He heard it too. The whispers aren't words. Not really. They're the sound of vellum aging, of ink corroding parchment, of time itself gnawing on the sacred words. SSS, candles eats the words. The voice, is it a voice? Is dry, papery, ancient, quirky or fringe tidbit. Some scribes believe the materials themselves could whisper in the exhausted silence before lords, the vellum remembering the animal it once was, the ink murmuring of oak galls and vitriol, the tallow candles sighing of rendered fat and stolen light. Listening too closely was said to invite despair, the knowledge of decay that undermined faith in the work's permanence. You press your hands over your ears. The papery whisper seeps through, a cold breath against your eardrums. All fides, dust. It's the voice of the Grey Watchers, or the scriptorium itself, or your own unraveling mind voicing the unthinkable. That every stroke of the quill, every mirrored letter, every sacrifice of warmth and sleep, was a battle fought against an enemy that always wins: time, oblivion, decay. The backward writing feels suddenly, horrifyingly pointless. A frantic dance on the skin of a dying beast. A harsh, grating sound shatters the whispers. Brother Anselm drags his stool back, the legs shrieking on the flagstones. He stands, swaying slightly, his face turned towards the window slit, ignoring Brother Librarian's silent command. The grey light paints his profile, gaunt, resolute, utterly spent. He doesn't look at the shadows, the whispers, or his ruined page. He looks only at the lightening grey, his lips moving in a silent plea or curse. The bell for lords must ring soon. It is the only anchor left in this dissolving world, the only sound that can banish the papery whispers of decay and the skittering shadows born of monotony's crushing weight. The vigil isn't over. It's entered its most treacherous phase, the silent, hallucinatory wait for the next call to endure. The candle gutters one last time, surrendering to the grey dawn, leaving you in a world drained of colour and warmth, haunted by the sibilant ghosts of impermanence. Section 24. The grating scrape of Brother Anselm's stool fades into the grey silence, leaving only the papery whispers of decay. Sesakadiskin, Isol Fides, coiling through the exhausted air. Brother Librarian's gaze, sharp as a flint blade, snaps towards Anselm's defiant stance. A beat of profound stillness hangs, thick with unspoken tension. Then, salvation, the deep, resonant tolling of the Lord's bell shatters the spell. Bong, bong, bong. The sound vibrates through the stone, a physical wave that momentarily drowns the whispers and loosens the vice grip of fatigue. It's not a reprieve, it's a transfer of custody. Movement erupts, stiff, jerky, a puppet show of exhaustion. Quills are laid down with finality. Ink pots stoppered. Manuscripts closed with reverent care that feels like a farewell. Your own backward scarred pages, the crooked Tidnexa, the grey smear of cursed Muitnalis, are gathered. The ruined quill is discarded into a wastebasket woven from rushes. Brother Librarian moves down the aisle, his own gaunt frame radiating weary authority. He stops at each desk, collecting the night's labor in his arms like fragile infants. When he reaches yours, his eyes flick over the damaged page. His expression remains impassive, but his fingers, brushing the grey smear where dawn's thief touched, linger for a fraction longer. Judgment withheld, but noted. He lifts your gathering with surprising gentleness, adding it to the stack cradled against his chest. Your night struggle, your mirrored agony, reduced to a sheaf of cold parchment. Mainstream historical fact. The transfer of freshly copied gatherings to the scriptorium master or librarian was a ritual of profound significance. Each page represented hours of sacred labor, vulnerable until bound into the protective armor of a codex. Damage here meant catastrophic loss. The librarian's role was as much guardian as facilitator, ensuring the fragile bridge between the scribe's hand and the library's eternity remained unbroken. You rise. The movement sends bolts of pain through your locked spine and screaming joints. The cold flagstones leach the last vestiges of warmth through your thin soles. You shuffle towards the door, joining the silent procession of spectres leaving the scriptorium. The grey light, stronger now, reveals the battlefield in all its squalor. Spilled ink like dried blood, drifts of quill shavings like fallen feathers, the skeletal remains of candles drowned in wax. The corridor is marginally warmer, thick with the scent of damp stone and the collective exhalation of exhausted men. No one speaks. The silence isn't the focused hush of labor, but the hollow aftermath of shared trauma. Faces are grey masks, eyes downcast or staring blankly ahead. Brother Anselm walks slightly ahead, his posture rigid, a tremor visible in his shoulders. Brother Cuthbert sniffles, wiping his nose on his sleeve. You pass the stern saint statue. Its stone eyes seem less judgmental now, merely weary. The library door looms, heavy oak, banded with iron. Brother Librarian fumbles with a large iron key, the rasp of metal on metal loud in the silence. The lock yields with a deep clunk. He pushes the door open, and a different kind of air washes over you. Cool, dry, and thick with the scent of aged parchment, dust undisturbed for decades, and the faint, sweet decay of leather bindings. It's the smell of time suspended. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some libraries employed incarnable crones, elderly lay sisters or widows with exceptionally soft hands and steady nerves, whose sole duty was the delicate handling of the most fragile manuscripts during cataloguing or repair. They moved with glacial slowness, their touch feather-light, whispering prayers against the brittle sin of haste that could shatter centuries with a careless fold. No crone appears tonight. Brother Librarian carries the burden alone. You step inside. Rows of high oak shelves stretch into the gloom, disappearing into shadows untouched by the grey light filtering through high, narrow windows. Codices stand shoulder to shoulder like armored knights on silent vigil, their spines tooled with fading gold leaf or simple, sturdy leather. The air thrums with a profound, resonant quiet, deeper than the scriptorium's hush, the accumulated silence of centuries of unread words. Historians still argue whether this immense labor of preservation was driven primarily by a genuine thirst for classical and theological knowledge, an unwavering duty to God to safeguard His word, and the wisdom of the ancient seen as divinely inspired, or simply the institutional inertia of the monastic machine, copying because copying was what one did generation after generation. Was it love, duty, or ingrained habit that filled these silent halls? Brother Librarian moves to a sturdy oak table near the center, bathed in the strongest grey light. He lays down the stack of gatherings with infinite care. Your backward pages rest near the top. Seeing them here, amidst the towering shelves holding the works of Augustine, Aristotle, and long-dead chroniclers, underscores their insignificance. Flawed, smudged, cursed by dawn. A single, crooked brick in a vast, ancient wall. Mainstream historical fact. The anonymity of the medieval scribe was near total. Colophons, scribal notes identifying the writer, were rare, especially in monastic contexts. Labor was offered to God and community, not individual glory. Your name won't grace the spine. No illuminator will capture your hunched form in the margin. You are a cipher, a vessel. One link in a chain stretching back to Alexandrian scholars copying scrolls by oil lamp, Roman slaves etching wax tablets, and forward into an unimaginable future. The work, the mirrored words, the sacred text, the preserved fragment of Seneca or Psalms, is the only monument. A profound sense of smallness, colder than the library's chill, settles over you. You are a single breath in a gale, a grain of sand on an endless shore. The grand sweeps of history, emperors crowned, battles lost, philosophies born, feel muffled, distant echoes beyond these thick walls. Yet, paradoxically, this tiny, imperfect contribution matters. It plugs a minute leak in the vast dam holding back the flood of forgetting. One skipped line, one corrupted word in your backward passage, could ripple through time, altering a scholar's understanding, misguiding a prayer, twisting doctrine. The pressure is immense, yet strangely liberating. Your individual suffering, the cramp, the hunger, the phantoms, dissolves into the enormity of the collective endeavor. You are insignificant, yet indispensable. Brother Librarian places your gathering onto a larger stack destined for the binder. It looks small, vulnerable. A single sheepskin holding mirrored fragments of eternity. Soon, the binder's needle and thread will pierce it. Hammered oak boards will encase it like armor. It will take its place on a shelf, spine facing out, title perhaps rubricated by another weary hand. It will sleep. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some bookbinders secretly slip slivers of rowan wood or tiny parchment prayers against decay between the binding boards, believing they warded off worms, damp, and the gnawing teeth of time. Will yours carry such a hidden blessing? Historians still argue whether the scribes themselves felt this weight of historical responsibility, or if the relentless daily grind, the cold, the quotas, the aching back, overshadowed any grand thoughts of posterity. Did the monk shivering over a backward passage at midnight ponder his role in preserving Cicero, or just the numbing pain in his thumb? Standing here, dwarfed by the silent army of codices, you feel both, the crushing weight of the chain and the strange solace of being part of something vastly larger than your own exhaustion. The bell for Lords tolls again, more insistently. Time to move. Brother Librarian gestures silently towards the door. You cast one last look at your gathering, a pale rectangle on the stack. The grey smear of Muitnalis seems darker in this light, a bruise on the skin of knowledge. Then you turn, following the others out of the cool, timeless air of the library, back into the clammy chill of the corridor, towards the chapel's stone floor and the next obligation. The vigil in the scriptorium is over. The vigil for the fragile thread of knowledge, spun from fatigue, cold, and the stubborn, mirrored persistence of anonymous hands, continues. Dawn brings no rest, only the next fragile link to be forged. Section 25. The Lord's bell's final toll still vibrates in the stones as you shuffle into the chapel's chill embrace. Dawn's grey light, weak and watery, streams through high, narrow windows, failing to warm the air thick with the night's lingering cold and the scent of damp wool, extinguished candle smoke, and stale incense. It's a sepulchral light, revealing the haggard faces of your brothers in stark relief. Cheeks hollow, eyes bruised by exhaustion, postures bent like storm-blasted trees. You find your place in the choir stall, the oak worn smooth by generations of weary bodies. The stone floor bites through your thin sandals, a familiar agony. Kneeling is torture, your spine groans, muscles locked in the hunched scriptorium shape. The abbot's voice rises, clear and unwavering, Deus in adiutorium meum intend. O God, come to my assistance. The response from the monks is a ragged murmur, voices cracked and thin, more sigh than song. Mainstream historical fact. Lords, the morning office, was a complex liturgy, multiple psalms, a scripture reading, a gospel canticle, usually the Benedictus, intercessions, and a final prayer. It could last over 45 minutes, demanding standing, kneeling, and chanting while bodies screamed for rest and sustenance. Your own voice is a ghost of itself, forming the Latin syllables by rote while your mind floats, detached. The words of the Benedictus, per viscera misericordiae Dei nostri, through the tender mercy of our God, feel like a cruel irony. Mercy is the warmth of a bed, the absence of pain, not this glacial ritual. Your knees ache. Your empty stomach clenches, a raw, hollow void echoing the chapel's vaults. Quirky or fringe tidbit. Some monks believe the first crust of bread eaten after Lord's, if saved and placed beneath one's pillow, could ward off nocturnal phantoms plaguing future shifts. The promise of crusts feels like a lifeline. The chanting drones on. Your vision blurs. The painted saints on the walls seem to sway. The Christ figure above the altar, arms outstretched, morphs momentarily into the image of a hunched scribe, quill in hand, chained to an endless scroll. You blink. The illusion fades, leaving only the sacred wounds and the abbot's relentless cadence. Historians still argue whether the physical ordeal of prolonged prayer immediately following a night of intense labor deepened monastic spirituality through shared suffering or merely reduced it to endurance theater, where hollow ritual replaced genuine devotion. Is this communal praise, or communal penance for the sin of existing in frail bodies? Brother Anselm sways beside you, his clawed hand gripping the stall partition, knuckles white. His lips move, but no sound emerges. His eyes are closed. Is he praying or sleeping upright? The final Amen arrives like a pardon. Movement is stiff, creaking. The procession shuffles out, not towards rest, but towards the refectory. The promise of food is a dull throb in the void of your stomach. The refectory is marginally warmer, smelling of damp rushes and yesterday's pottage. Long trestle tables hold wooden bowls and cups. You slump onto a bench. The breakfast is a mockery. A heel of coarse, dark bread dense as clay, a small wedge of hard, sour cheese smelling faintly of the cellar, and a mug of thin, lukewarm cervisia. Small beer so weak it's barely alcoholic, more liquid bread than sustenance. Mainstream historical fact, the monastic diet was caloric poor, especially in winter. Breakfast aimed for functionality, not satisfaction. Bread provided carbohydrates for labor, cheese offered minimal protein and fat, and small beer, safer than stagnant water, hydrated without intoxicating. You tear the bread. It's stale, requiring desperate chewing that jars your aching jaw. The cheese crumbles, tasting of damp salt and resignation. The beer washes it down, leaving a yeasty aftertaste. It does nothing to fill the void, only highlights its edges. The meal passes in near silence, broken only by the sounds of chewing and swallowing, the scrape of wooden bowls. No one speaks. Energy must be conserved. Eyes are downcast, fixed on the meager fare. The crust Brother Cuthbert saves is tiny, hard. He pockets it furtively, a charm against the next night's terrors. Hope is reduced to superstition and crumbs. All too soon, a bell clangs, a sharp, utilitarian sound. Prime. The work of God is done, the work of the hand resumes. Dread settles like lead in your stomach. You rise, joints protesting, and shuffle back towards the scriptorium. The grey dawn light is stronger now, but it holds no warmth, only the revelation of mud tracked on flagstones, frost etching the window panes, and the grim set of Brother Anselm's face as he walks beside you. The heavy oak door groans open. The cold inside the scriptorium hits like a physical blow, sharper now after the brief fug of the refectory. It smells of tallow smoke, old ink, and the lingering metallic tang of exhaustion. Your desk awaits. The new candle Brother Librarian provided earlier stands tall, a fresh soldier in the war against darkness. Beside it lies the manuscript, open once more to the backward passage. Retro scribendum estimated. The mirrored words glare up, unfinished. Your stool is an instrument of torture. You perch on its edge. Your hand, stiff and cold, fumbles for the quill. The ink pot is still full, the iron gall ink dark and potent. The cycle grinds back into motion. Dip. Reverse letter. Form shape. Dip. The backward struggle begins anew. Historians still argue whether this relentless cycle, prayer, labor, scant sustenance, prayer, forged resilient spirits or merely broke bodies and minds, leaving behind chronic illness, premature aging, and libraries filled with texts copied by hands trembling with fatigue rather than piety. Was it devotion or institutionalized attrition? Your gaze flicks to the high window slit. True sunlight, weak and pale gold, finally touches the outer edge of the stone. It illuminates motes of dust dancing in the air. Not phantoms, just dust. The spider's thread, if it still hangs, is invisible now. Dawn has broken, but it brings no deliverance. Only the continuation of the vigil, the persistence of the backward word on sacred skin, the silent, anonymous labor against the encroaching dark. The warmth of your bed is a memory fading faster than the night's phantoms. The cold quill is your reality. The mirrored text awaits. You take a breath that feels like shards of ice in your lungs, dip the quill, and begin. Wind down. The scratch of your quill becomes a distant rhythm now, not a demand, but a gentle pulse beneath the quiet. The harsh angles of the scriptorium soften, the cold stone seeming less like a prison and more like a shelter, a vessel holding the fragile, vital warmth of human effort against the vast indifference of time. Think of the countless hands that have moved like yours, tracing wisdom onto resilient skin, not for glory, but for the simple, profound act of passing the light onward. Your backward letters, your weary bones, the ache in your spine, they are part of a tapestry woven with threads of devotion and quiet courage, stretching back through centuries of candlelit vigils and forward into futures you'll never see. The knowledge you help preserve isn't just ink on vellum. It's the shared breath of humanity, a whispered conversation across the ages, insisting that understanding, beauty, and truth are worth the struggle, worth the cold hours, worth the anonymous toil. Feel the weight of that purpose, not as a burden, but as a deep, grounding comfort. You are connected. You are part of something enduring. The saints in their alcoves seem to smile now, not in judgment, but in recognition of the shared, quiet dignity of perseverance. The chill in the air softens, becoming a clean, clear freshness, like the first breath drawn at dawn after a long night. The flickering candlelight transforms from a battle against gloom into a gentle, golden companion, casting warm, dancing patterns that soothe rather than menace. Even the scent, parchment, old ink, beeswax, becomes familiar, comforting, like the quiet pages of a beloved book opened late at night. Let the tension ease from your shoulders, your hands, your jaw. Release the weight of the backward letters, the unanswered questions. They are safe now, held in the patient embrace of the page and the centuries. Your vigil, however imperfect, is complete for this night. Your offering is given. Allow the stillness of the library, the deep, resonant silence of preserved thought, to wash over you. It holds no demands, only peace. The distant sound of plainsong from the chapel, if you listen, is no longer a call to duty, but a gentle lullaby drifting on the edge of sleep, a reminder of harmony, of voices joined not in exhaustion, but in timeless, communal rest. Breathe deeply. Let the quiet cradle you. The work endures. The light is kept. You can rest now. End of script. Sweet dreams.